Happy New Year, everybody. We're back with you guys on another Friday night. It's January 1st. 2020 is gone. 2021 is here. And Disney, it looks like, is developing a Luke Skywalker series. That's right. We may actually get a Luke Skywalker series. We're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk a lot more Star Wars right now.
You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for this show. So, I mean, you didn't watch the whole thing, but I just got through watching Cobra Kai. So, you guys have to forgive me. I'm still coming down. I don't know if you guys are fans of the Cobra Kai series or not, but we are huge fans of Cobra Kai. In fact, we could probably actually do like another show on Cobra Kai, which, who knows, maybe one day we'll end up doing that. But gotta shift gears back to Star Wars.
Yeah, man. I mean, I feel almost as happy as like when The Mandalorian, you know.
I know.
So.
I know. That's what's been really cool. And speaking of The Mandalorian, don't forget to watch us on Monday because we're actually going to go over. They did this whole making of thing for season 2 now.
Yep.
So they didn't call it the gallery though, did they? They did?
Mm-hmm. It's season 2.
See, I haven't. That's proof right there that I haven't watched it yet. So we're gonna go through that. We're gonna actually talk about it, discuss it with you guys live, of course, on a Monday. And hey, we've got our friend Ronaldo. He's here. Happy New Year, Ronaldo.
Happy New Year, man.
Happy New Year to everybody. And there's been no shortage of Star Wars news.
Man, no.
Like, you got a bunch of people that are in trouble. You got, all kinds of stuff, right? We're just coming off of that whole Mandalorian season finale.
Yep.
We're all pumped up for the next season now. So there's things that we're gonna talk a little bit about that, like what we're gonna want to see from the Book of Boba Fett. We got Pablo Hidalgo, who's in a little bit of trouble.
Yeah, he's a little hot water, man.
Patty Jenkins may end up losing her Star Wars movie. Speaking of that whole season finale of Mandalorian, we're going to talk a little bit about Luke Skywalker, and then we're going to compare that to the Rogue One scene with Darth Vader. So we got a lot of cool stuff to talk about. Before we do, you guys can't really see this whole shirt that I got on right now, but I got to show you guys this. So I am wearing my Baby Yoda Christmas sweater, the ugly Christmas sweater thing. I had to do it. I don't know why I didn't do it before, but for some odd reason, I forgot to wear it this season. So it's still technically the holiday seasons for one more day. So
Yep.
I'm going to do it. But I had to show you guys that one. All right, so are you ready to get into this whole Luke Skywalker series or what?
Man, let's get to it.
All right, let's do it. All right, so Luke Skywalker may be getting his own series, it looks like. Disney Plus announced that it's in development. Now, I should clarify that in development actually means they're just working on some concepts and scripting it out. It isn't like we're going to get some sort of release date on this thing, any minute or whatever. It's in development. But I thought it would be a good time for us to talk about what we want to see. Because if they actually do a series on Luke Skywalker, that's going to raise fan expectation. And I don't know about you, but I actually think that could be dangerous because on one hand, it could satisfy fans because I know I, for one, think that they need to do something on Luke Skywalker, but the danger of doing it on TV or movies or anything like that versus doing it in a book is that you're going to be playing a little bit more with fan expectations. So what are some of the things that you're thinking about?
Well, first of all, I really do think we do need to cover Luke. I think the last episode of The Mandalorian pretty much proved that to fans. I mean, I sent you this thing the other day about the fans' reaction to that whole thing.
Yeah, that was...
And it's been crazy, and we'll even kind of get a little bit more into this. This is actually going to be kind of like the Luke Skywalker show, almost in a way, because pretty much almost every aspect of today's show is going to have some element of Luke in it. But I think that, fans have been clamoring. Fans want to see what actually happened from post Return of the Jedi on almost until we get to Force Awakens. We know eventually he takes on some new students. We know he eventually gets his nephew, Kylo Ren. But we really don't know what happened with everything that led up to that. Did Han and Leia just eventually automatically just kind of disperse, or how long did that happen? What are some other adventures Luke went on? I mean, we know that he rescued, Grogu. So of course people want to know, okay, well, what was that like? We want to see Luke training Grogu and how that all panned out, and because we don't see him in the sequel trilogy. So once again, a lot of fans are going to wonder, like, okay, did something happen to him? And then there's a lot of things that people feel that are going to be not necessarily retcon, but kind of fixed throughout these different spinoff shows.
Oh, I'm firmly in that camp. I think that what
Yeah.
Disney and Lucasfilm are actually doing, they're just not telling us this,
Right.
is they're slowly rebooting the sequel trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
That basically they're not going to, because, every time that you hear rumors and things like that, there's always some truth to it.
Right.
Where there's smoke, there's fire, as they say, right?
Right.
So there's definitely some truth to, there's just been too many of this whole, oh, they're rebooting the sequel trilogy, or, oh, Lucas is going to come in and, rewrite it and make new movies and all this stuff. Don't actually think they're going to make new movies. That would be detrimental. Because you can't just be like, oh, guess what? Here's the real 7, 8, and 9.
Right. Those didn't exist.
Yeah, I mean, the only way that I could see them doing that is maybe 20, 30 years from now. But then you would have to recast stuff. There would almost be no point. I mean, if the original actors couldn't portray their parts, and that's the problem with rebooting the sequel trilogy, is that you actually had Harrison Ford, Mark Hamill, and Carrie Fisher in those movies.
Right.
Which you're not going to at least have one of them. And I don't know if Harrison Ford would agree to come back and redo it again.
Right.
I mean, Mark Hamill might, but even that would be a hard sell. So I think what they're doing is they're doing this soft reboot. So they get you used to maybe a different actor playing Luke Skywalker. And of course, we have Alden Ehrenreich as Han Solo already. And they get you used to this stuff. So that way, by the time we get up to that timeline, maybe it's 10, 15 years away, they could actually slowly do something that undoes that.
So from the Luke Skywalker series, should that happen? What are some things that you want to see?
Well, I agree that it probably should happen. I mean, I don't necessarily, again, I was never really asking for a Luke Skywalker series. I would rather actually see it more in book form or comics or something like that, only because it's a safer choice.
Mm-hmm.
I would actually rather see Luke being a part of other series. So maybe he's kind of like the Nick Fury of the Star Wars universe. He can pop up in The Mandalorian. He can pop up in the Book of Boba Fett. He can pop up in Ahsoka. He can pop up in all these different series. But the problem is, if you dedicate a series to him, you have to be really careful. Now, if we're talking about, okay, look, they greenlit a series, we're going to get it, what do I want to see? I think I would probably want to see what he's doing between the time of Return of the Jedi to The Mandalorian. I think that would be a good season 1. I think season 2 should cover just after he takes Grogu and, whatever he's going to do with him. Maybe a season 3. Again, you could do this in stages, right? You can actually have him training Jedi, building the Jedi Order. Perhaps he has to fight some fragments of maybe dark side users. Vader and Palpatine weren't the only ones.
True.
So there's a lot of things that they could do, but I mean, I don't know. I think when it comes to what do we want to see in the Luke Skywalker series, I think it's really more about what we don't want to see than what we do. Because it's one of those things that I don't necessarily know if I know everything that I would want to see. The Mandalorian's a great example of that. When they announced that they were doing this whole Mandalorian series and it wasn't going to be Boba Fett, I'm like, okay, it's not going to be Boba Fett. Then everybody's like, well, what do you want to see in this thing? And I'm like, well, I don't know. Kind of depends on who the Mandalorian is, and I guess I want to see what he's about, and I want to see some recurring original trilogy characters, because even though I don't want them to shrink the universe, if you establish all these really cool characters, I don't necessarily want to just abandon them. That's the problem with a franchise like this, is that on one hand, It's like, well, we keep seeing these same people. But that's because these people are fairly well written, and we want to see what happens next. That's the problem that we had with the original trilogy characters. It's like, yeah, everybody's like, well, go do something else. It's like, no. I want to see what happens to Han, Luke, and Leia after Return of the Jedi. I don't care about Rey, Finn, and Poe. At least I didn't at the time. But then, even though they weren't the best written characters, they were well written enough that I was into them. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like one of those things that I'm not necessarily sure. So I think what we have to do is we have to figure out what we need. And of course, you guys that are in the chat that are watching this live, feel free to chime in too. But we have to figure out what it is needs to happen. I think that's the biggest thing. If you're going to do a Luke Skywalker series, you have to figure out not necessarily just what you want to see in it, but what you think you have to see in it.
Right. I mean, I think, so to your point, I think between Return of the Jedi up until Mandalorian, yes, I definitely think we need to see that. And I think because by the Mandalorian, Luke is definitely a master at this point.
Absolutely.
If not, I know some people say he may be Grandmaster level, but they said that probably came a little bit later. But he's definitely a master by this point.
Yeah, I mean, if he's not a Grandmaster, he's well on his way.
Right.
And I just think that, to what you're saying, it's basically like, look, when you have the Mandalorian, right, you have Ahsoka, you have just the way that a lot of this is going. It's like, well, I need to see how did it get there from Luke? Why is Ahsoka still around? And why didn't she come back? Why didn't she help him? I mean, we've addressed this in some of the other shows that we've had, but I think that if you're going to put together a series with Luke Skywalker, you have to be very focused about where you want that to go. First thing they need to do, in my opinion, is they need to write the entire story arc. Now, you don't need to fill in every little detail, but you need to have a beginning, middle, and end. How many seasons do you want it to go? How many episodes per season are you going to break this into? Write the actual story and then break it into seasons and then episodes. Because to me, that's going to... You can't do this whole we're making it up as we go along kind of thing. Now, I see that Ronaldo's chatting in like crazy here.
Yeah, he says, if this happens, and I will try not to create expectations in my mind, I have a list of things that I would like to see. One would be, I would like to see Ben Solo appear. 2, I would like for Luke to comment on the mistakes of the prequel Jedi and how they ruined everything with their dogmatic point of view. And 3, I would like to see Palpatine and Snoke talking to Ben in his mind. And 4, I would like to see Luke talk to the Force ghosts of Anakin, Yoda, or Obi-Wan.
It's almost like he's had time to think about this. Yeah, these are all actually very good points. Let's take some of these here because, so Ben Solo appearing. It would be a little bit too early if you cover after Return of the Jedi because Ben Solo's like, what? Maybe 25? Maybe 30? Right? So, oh, yeah, my mom chats. Hi, guys. Would like to see Luke with a girlfriend. Actually, that happened. Mara Jade.
Yeah, Mara Jade. Yeah.
Mara Jade, who started out as the Emperor's hand and was sent to assassinate Luke, actually was... Yep. They actually became not only romantically involved, but they got married. They had a kid who was ironically Ben Skywalker. So I think that, yes, they should probably explore some of that. I would like to see Mara Jade appear. If they're going to do a Luke Skywalker series, I think we should see Mara Jade at that point.
Do you think they're going to change her?
No, they don't have to. This is the beautiful thing about it. Because, remember, we don't see Luke until... like way after a lot of this stuff. Like all that expanded universe stuff with Mara Jade could actually occur before the events of The Force Awakens.
But no, what I'm saying is, but we've never seen her before. So if we're saying she's the Emperor's hand, we've never seen her original trilogy.
No, and you didn't even when Thrawn wrote his trilogy. Because remember, Thrawn wrote those 3 books after Return of the Jedi had come out. This is like 1991.
I was on.
Yeah.
He said Thrawn. That's
Did I?
I
said the Thrawn trilogy. Did I say when Thrawn wrote his trilogy?
Yeah, I was like, did he?
Wait, Thrawn's real. Yes, Zahn, thank you. Hey, if you didn't point it out, somebody in the chat probably would, or the comment section. I'd probably get like endless comments. But yes, when Timothy Zahn wrote the Thrawn trilogy, how about that one?
There you go.
All right. Yeah, that was pretty much where Mara Jade was introduced, and that whole storyline. I mean, that was one of the things that was kind of cool, was that because one of the things that we saw in that trilogy was the fact that you had more to the story. Just because it's on my mind, it's kind of like Cobra Kai. When you look at something like Cobra Kai, and believe me, this does relate, guys. When you look at something like Cobra Kai, did you actually think that seeing the 3, you could throw the 4th one in there too, because it does have a lot of Miyagi's stuff. There's a lot of Miyagi story in the next Karate Kid. Did you really think there would be that much to the universe?
No.
No, nobody did. In fact, one of the things that shocked everybody about that show was the fact that they're like, man, I can't believe, to me, the Karate Kid movies were just some really good movies, but I didn't think about them after I saw them. I just thought, yeah, it was a really cool thing. I wasn't looking at the karate verse or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as Cobra Kai comes out, now you're seeing not just a lot of the characters that we're familiar with and not just the new ones, but there was some people, even like other sides to the story from the movies that are filtering into the show. And that's what could happen with the Luke Skywalker series, just like that's what happened with the Thrawn trilogy, was the fact that, you didn't see the Emperor's hands. You didn't even know he had assassins or whatever, but that was a thing that was introduced that did not conflict in any way with the canon of the original trilogy. And so now you have this Emperor's hand that wants to kill the one who killed the Emperor.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really cool. And they could do that. I didn't actually think about that, but they could actually bring Mara Jade in perfectly with this series.
Yeah.
But going to Ronaldo's stuff, Ben Solo, like I said, maybe a little bit too early.
Yeah.
Certainly later seasons.
Yeah, if you go that route, yeah.
Sure. Luke commenting on the mistake of the prequels and how they ruined everything with their dogmatic point of view. It might be, I think that would be something that you would see more later in the series. Like, say it went 5 seasons, maybe a season 3, because you have to remember that Luke is still very much, at the end of Return of the Jedi, he's all like, I am a Jedi, like my father before me. He's still got those rose-colored glasses on as far as the Jedi comes, or goes, or one of them. Basically, he doesn't know yet enough to be disillusioned. You can argue by the time of The Mandalorian, though, and that's another thing. I mean, how do you actually break this up into seasons? Do you have like, because if you think about it, there's like 6 years between Return of the Jedi and The Mandalorian. Do you cover the whole show in that time period? Do you go like, okay, season 1 covers like 4 years and season 2 cover, you know what I'm saying? It's like,
well, yeah, I mean, I just think that with if you do that timeline where you're going from Return of the Jedi to The Mandalorian, I mean, there's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of material that could be brought out in there. You have, okay, what's his first thing to do now? Like, okay, you have this whole, Leia's trying to put the whole Republic together. Luke's trying to start this Jedi temple. Or, and my thing is kind of like, well, how do you even start that when you don't even, like, you just got this position, basically. I mean, and that's, I would love to see those struggles of that. Just him. I mean, probably a good portion of that is probably him trying to find the stuff and study this new world for him, kind of like all over again. So he's probably going out to find different holocrons. He's going to find, different books and all that stuff to kind of find, okay, here's a teaching of the Jedi. Because I know Yoda didn't have that much time to really give him the, the history and the backstory.
Certainly not, no.
So it's just like, look, I just got to get you ready for the fight, pretty much. So now Luke has that time to kind of go back. And so, I can understand Luke trying to go out and be, a little bit more diplomatic now. I can see Luke trying to, go and trying to acquire some more stuff. And then maybe in the process of him trying to acquire things, he runs into a dark force user like, oh, well, you killed Vader, on guard, and the fight
Well,
breaks out.
here's something interesting. Not that I'm trying to compare this to every franchise that's out there right now, but where Luke's journey at the end of Return of the Jedi, it reminds me of Creed at the end of Creed 2. Because they announced that they're doing Creed 3.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know yet. Like, nobody knows if Rocky's going to be in it or not or whatever. Because that character technically had his storyline wrapped up pretty nicely. But that doesn't stop Sylvester Stallone. I mean,
Right.
They wrapped it up nicely in Rocky 6. They wrapped it up nicely in 5. It's kind of like Rocky's had his story wrapped up quite a bit, right? But at the end of Creed 2, though...
He should be mummified at this point.
Right? But at the end of Creed 2, the thing that was really interesting to me about that is that in thinking about Creed 3, where do you go? Because he basically now knows what he needs to know, and that's pretty much what Rocky was doing with him, was training him for these fights that he had to do. Now, granted, he was a fighter longer than Luke was a Jedi, but there's a very huge similarity, though, in my mind, between the two, because exactly how do you tell this story? You could go to the expanded universe, and that's what I would do. I would essentially lift the Luke Skywalker part from the expanded universe and just drop it into the series. Make it about him exploring the whole Jedi Order. And how is he going to build his Jedi Order compared to the old one? Is he just going to rebuild the old one that we know of in the Old Republic or even the Phantom Menace and basically the prequels?
Mm-hmm.
Or is he going to build a new version of it, which is pretty much what he does in the expanded universe?
Yeah, I mean, he definitely, reformat some things, and certain rules didn't apply, any longer.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing, too. This is where you can, like I said, you could literally drop the whole thing. This is where you can introduce Kip Duran. This is where you can introduce, I mean, you can't really do the whole Jason, Jaina Solo thing, but you can have surrogates for them.
Right.
Or maybe this is where you introduce Ben Solo, but a little bit later. So once Luke has his Jedi Academy firmly established, then you can bring Ben Solo into it, and now you can begin to tell that story of how Snoke got to him. Because you brought this up several times. I mean, everybody's always going, in the Force Awakens, Han's like, well, Snoke got to him. Well, yeah, Snoke. It's like, well, wait a minute. You all know who he is. Mm-hmm. He's not exactly operating in the shadows, is he?
Nope.
And if you read The Rise of Kylo Ren, this is even more apparent, is because Snoke obviously knew him, got to him, was working with him for a while. So it's like, why does this guy all of a sudden have this incredible influence over him? Over his own uncle. It's not just his Jedi master, it's his uncle.
Yeah.
And Leia being his mom, it's mind-blowing to me the fact that Snoke was able to get his hands into Ben so easily. But maybe it wasn't easy. I mean, even the Rise of Kylo Ren comic series deals sort of like with the tail end. It's like there's like one issue or something that deals with him sort of wrestling with some of the things he was wrestling with Snoke, and then all of a sudden the next issue, there comes the betrayal. But we don't know what leads up to that. So the question is, do you think that Ben Solo should be something they work into the Luke series at all? Do you think it should be later seasons?
I'll probably say if you're going to do it later. Like closer to, okay, his turn. Like, okay, maybe a few months before he decides to, before that whole confrontation with Luke and in that whole hut. You
know what I think? I think it should be the series finale.
Yeah, I mean, of course.
Like the very last episode of the series, almost like how, sort of like how Rogue One butts up against episode 4.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty much what I think you could do. You could almost have the last episode of the Luke Skywalker series just go like right up against The Force Awakens. But if you do that, in this series, are you going to go through 30 years of Luke Skywalker's history, or are you going to concentrate on a specific time period? See, that's the big question. And this is why I'm a little skeptical about having a Luke series, because on one hand, every fan in the world's like, yes, this is great. This is wonderful news. I can't wait. And it's like, wait a second, though. Are you really thinking about this? Because think about it. Nobody in the Star Wars universe seems like, well, maybe except for Filoni and Favreau. But anytime a movie's made or anytime anything else is made, it's like they can't make anything without somebody coming in and go, wait a second. Usually it's Kathleen Kennedy. With second thoughts and doubts and all this, you have to be very, very careful about how you approach a character like Luke, because look at what happened to Rian Johnson.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that, anytime you deal with the original characters, you have to kind of handle it with kid gloves, and that includes Yoda, that includes, that's why we're anxious to see what the High Republic is going to bring. But I think we really have to just kind of, I think we all want to see Luke, but I think you have the best answer, and that's let him pop up, and he might be in a couple story arcs or something like that, and then he fades away.
See, to me, that would just be the easiest way to do it, because then you're not tied to a series. It's again, and I've used this analogy a million times on the show over the years. It's like when a band hires a keyboard player. The problem with when you hire a keyboard player is now you got to have keyboards in every song, because the keyboard player just cannot stand to, if they're there, they want to do something.
Right.
The nice thing is that if you hire like a session guy or you have a touring guy, then it's sort of like when there are keyboards in the song, you can then just have somebody there to play them. And it's the same thing here. If you have a Luke Skywalker series, you're kind of forced to deal with Luke Skywalker all the time. Which, don't get me wrong, I think that would be an interesting story, but at the same time, his story, I think, would be best served if he wasn't tied to a series. If he could just pop up and, hey, you know what, in this series, this would be a good time to advance the Luke Skywalker thing, so you bring him in for a story arc or something.
Yeah, Ronaldo's been burning up the chat. He says, if I'm not mistaken, Ben is roughly 4 or 5 years old at this time, so there will have to be a time jump. And to add to your point, I would like an explanation on how Luke's order differs from the old order. I highly doubt that it will be the exact same thing. I think we really don't need a Luke series, but it wouldn't be a bad idea. It will also calm the waters a lot. If it's done right.
Yeah, I was going to say, maybe, but maybe not. Because if it's not done right, and who's to say what's right?
Well, and I think that's why I think even if you did do this series, whomever you get, you better be sure to get Mark Hamill there to really direct this person on the character of Luke and everything that goes into playing that character.
Well, I think that they would have to leave it in the hands of like a Filoni or Favreau type.
Well, yeah, you would, but I'm just saying, just getting that essence of Luke, of how he would say certain things, or the way he holds his just all of that stuff. I think you would need to have Mark Hamill there, just no different than you had Harrison Ford teaching Alden Ehrenreich, some of the Han Solo stuff.
Well, kind of. That was a dinner. And they just talked about it for an evening, and then that was it. It wasn't like Harrison Ford was there on set guiding them or anything like that. It was just a simple, here's a couple pointers and make it your own. Harrison doesn't give a crap about this, really.
Well, yeah.
Mark Hamill cares way more about Luke, and more damage was done to Luke.
And that's what I'm saying. That's why I feel like you would need him to really be there to help, bridge that gap.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It would be nice to have him there and have his blessing and all that stuff. But you know what? Even if Mark Hamill was there, hey, he was there for The Last Jedi too. Now, granted, he didn't agree with what was going on, but he did it.
Well, yeah, but
And the thing is, the fans basically hated it. Some fans didn't, but a lot of them did, and it was, even us. We're like, well, okay, this isn't what we really wanted to see, but on the other hand, from a story perspective, it does make sense that realistically, this is where Luke would be. It's just not what you want to see after 30 years of not seeing this character.
Right.
It's like, really?
That's not what the first thing you want to see.
Right, right. See, if they had actually made the disillusionment and all that maybe later, or you do kind of a follow-up thing, right? So you had this first trilogy, and maybe at the end of 9, he starts to go, I'm not so sure that this is the best thing. I'm becoming a little disillusioned. I think that would have been more acceptable. Certainly, they could have worked something like that in. But, the problem is that you have this whole issue where you basically have the story that you have to serve, but then you also have fan expectation. And I think that that's the biggest thing that's really fighting Lucasfilm right now, is that you have to, on one hand, serve the story, but on the other hand, you have fan expectation, which somehow Filoni and Favreau seem to be able to do with no problem. But they're not even really free of criticism. You get criticism all the time of, well, this is like a filler episode, or, everybody's going to whine about something, but of course, nobody's sending them death threats either, like they were Rian Johnson, so exactly. There is that. But, it's one of those things that they just have to be very careful with it. If they're not careful enough, they do endanger losing the fan base or making it even more toxic than it already is.
Definitely.
Which is why I was surprised that they even announced this.
Well, that's why I said that it's in development.
But even announcing it's in development, because you know what that means. Disney's not stupid. They know if they announce something like that. Hey, if you said, we're going to be developing even a Lando series. Well, they did, actually. That's coming out, right? That's not going to create the same level of expectation as a Luke Skywalker series.
Of course.
Now, on one hand, you want to do it because everybody's already on this Luke Skywalker high from the season finale of The Mandalorian, but so it's like, hey guys, we're coming out with a whole series, maybe. So there is that, but at the same time, you just got to be like, if they don't handle it right, and I don't understand why they're having such a problem with this. I know this is probably a bigger conversation, but Star Wars used to be something that you considered mostly infallible.
Well, I think people are just having, because everybody has their own opinion. Everybody wants to. You got more hands in the pot, and like we often said, this came from the mind of one guy.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, okay, well, without him there, you're leaving the narratives up to interpretation, and everybody has their own thing.
No, that's a good point. It's true, because one of the things, and it's almost like that be careful what you wish for, because I was firmly the guy that after Revenge of the Sith came out, and he said, okay, I'm not doing any more Star Wars movies, that's it. Of course, that's a lie, because he was working on 7, 8, and 9 after a while, but, he was burned out. The guy had spent probably like 10 years of his life doing this. You could give him a free pass on that. But one of the first things that occurred to me was, look at all these expanded universe writers. And look at how many great stories are in the expanded universe. Well, if there's people that are writing these good stories, why can't you get a director or somebody who's a Star Wars fan to make a Star Wars film? If you don't want to make them, cool, but why not allow other people to make movies, much like you let other people write books? Now we're getting that. And in fact, when they made that whole, Lucasfilm Disney sale announcement back in 2012, you and I were just like, yes. Of course, the first thing we thought was we were going to get Timothy Zahn's Thrawn trilogy.
Yeah.
I have to be careful, because I'm also reading Thrawn Ascendancy Chaos Rising. That's another thing too. So I got Thrawn on the brain. But yeah, this is one of the things that I always thought was a cool thing, and now it turns out that nobody's really doing it right in either the eyes of Lucasfilm or in the eyes of the fans. Because if you look at Rian Johnson, he did, it was kind of a gutsy thing to do, but it's sort of what the fans had always been clamoring for. Don't give us the safe choices.
Right.
Don't give us a rehash.
Right.
Take the series somewhere different.
But then you give them that, and like, wait, this is too
Then
much.
you give them that, and they're like, wait, you're losing everything that makes Star Wars Star Wars. Don't go too far out. Don't, it's kind of like a win-lose or a lose-lose really situation where there's this really fine line. It's like you can't go too far outside, but we don't want to retread of the same thing.
Right.
Again, to make a music analogy, it's what a lot of big famous bands face all the time. They get known for creating perfect, like a sound that's original. And then fans are kind of like, okay, well, we don't want to retread of the last album, well, wait a second, you can't go too outside of what you do. So now the band's like, well, now what do we do?
Yeah, it's will be interesting. I mean, we have to definitely watch this as it develops. Um, I think once we get more information that comes from it, then we can probably make a better assessment on it.
Yeah, I mean,
If
did
this
they?
is really going to be.
Because they haven't really come up with any kind. There's no
No.
timeline or anything, right?
And that's what I was saying because, like, well, I mean, I guess they couldn't have announced it after the investors thing because that episode hadn't released yet. So they probably could. They could have said we're working on a Luke Skywalker film, but people probably might have been
Yeah.
like, well, you know what I'm saying?
It's
So
like, yeah, I mean, you can't.
just drop
If they had done that more in the middle of season 2, I think they could have gotten away with it more. But being that meeting took place like what, a few days or a week or something before the finale, that would have tripped people's spider sense too much.
Yep.
I think, yeah. So I mean, we're just gonna have to wait and see. I think,
Yeah.
But these are some of the important things that I think that they have to deal with. They have to deal with, just to recap, they got to deal with the time period. They have to have a complete story arc. They have to talk about Luke's further training as a Jedi. How is he getting more or students or just information like holocrons and stuff like that? If they want to deal with the Ben Solo thing, then you have to start dealing with Snoke and his influence and how did Snoke even come into the picture? Because we know that Palpatine created him, but we don't know. I mean, when did he pop up and say, hey, guys, my name's Snoke. By the way, I'm taking over this First Order. They could even get into how the First Order is created because this is something that I think they are going to do in The Mandalorian, by the way. I think they're definitely going to come up with a way to start to introduce the First Order because that was one of the things that I think they actually said they were going to do when the series premiered, is that you're going to get more information on how the First Order began. Because right now, we're 6 years out. You figure The Mandalorian takes place. I mean, we know that it starts 6 years after Return of the Jedi, but we're about to hit season 3 now. So where are we at now? 8, 10? You know what I mean? It's like we don't know how much time is transpiring. I mean, when we leave the characters in season 1, they had just sort of gotten their freedom or whatever, and now all of a sudden, Cara Dune's a marshal, and I mean, it's like, okay, this didn't happen a week later. So there's enough time that's transpiring between each of these seasons that they could now start to go, hey, well, the Empire's not going to be the Empire anymore. Now there's this new thing called the First Order, and that's what I would like to see. Ronaldo says, personally, I will always support what Ryan did in The Last Jedi. Imagine saying that on Twitter. Yeah, you know what?
Yeah.
You're a brave man for saying that on Twitter, because Twitter seems to be the most volatile of all the social medias when it comes to Star Wars.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's where people can really voice their opinions because,
I guess. I mean, it's insane. I mean, I wouldn't even say that on too many YouTube shows. I mean, most of the people that watch our show are pretty chill about stuff, but you know what? Even though we outline the problems of The Last Jedi, overall, we love the film. It has problems.
Definitely.
It has big problems, more than just the Luke Skywalker thing. But overall, I mean, it was a brave, somewhat interesting, darker choice. And some of the decisions were actually good. But we'll have to see.
Yep.
All right. Well, we're going to continue on this whole Luke Skywalker thing, aren't we?
Yes, we are, my friend.
All right. So now, what is it time for? Because you're the one that always has to announce this. It doesn't sound the same when I do it.
Next, we have Duel of the Fates.
Duel of the Fates is kind of interesting this time. We've got,
man. I wanted to kick this off with a bang.
Well, you know what? This is a really good idea. Now, this is really funny because I remember when we were talking about this before. It was hilarious because you had originally come up with something different.
Right.
And you thought that maybe that's what I had already made the stuff for before you changed it, but I ended up actually doing the right one. And I was kind of like, really? You want to do something different than this? Because this is actually kind of cool.
You're right.
So, yeah, this is... we're We're talking about the Luke Skywalker ending of The Mandalorian versus the Darth Vader ending of Rogue One. And
Yeah, which lightsaber ending was better?
well, I thought I was actually going to have an answer for this, but I mean, you have to look at it a couple of different ways. I would say probably for just impact and action, I would have to say the Luke Skywalker ending, because he just goes in and the Dark Troopers are way more powerful than the Rebels were. And, he's just cleaning house. I mean, they're very similar, actually.
Yeah, I mean, that was
the two
thing.
endings.
That's what everybody said after they saw it. It's like, man, this reminds me of the end of Rogue One.
It really does. But I'm going to go with the Darth Vader scene, and here's why. The reason I'm going with the Darth Vader scene is because of the emotional impact that it has in the fact that this is the time that we see Vader actually kicking butt as Vader in the suit.
Yeah, mechanical Vader.
And you really need to see the mechanical Vader somehow on screen doing its thing. It also does happen to be, before you guys start correcting me in the comments or on the chat, I do understand that this is also the first time that we see Luke at more of a master/grandmaster level too.
Mm-hmm.
However, we had already known that Luke was basically going to go into this, and we also see that through the sequel trilogy that he's ultra powerful. With Vader, we had never really seen Vader being just as, I guess, like super powerful as he is at the end of Rogue One. And it really just shows you, it makes Vader more threatening because, and you brought this up at the time that the Rogue One movie came out, and we were talking about this ending on one of the previous shows, and you're like, before now, we never, even though we understood kind of, it's like, why is everybody so scared to death of this guy?
Mm-hmm.
What is it about him that makes everybody so freaked out by him? Well, now you see.
Yeah.
Because this is something that the Empire has seen all along. Like, hey, listen, this guy can really do a lot of damage. So I'm going to have to go with the Darth Vader one. Come on, man. I know you're going with the Darth Vader one.
Of course I am, man.
I mean, I know you are. I almost picked the Luke Skywalker because...
Just to make it a battle.
Just to make it a battle. But I mean, I can still do it, though.
Yeah, you could.
I can make the argument. But it's really difficult because really the two parallel each other so much. In fact, I would not be shocked
if they really based it off of that.
Yeah, if they based it off of it.
Well,
I mean, look at her picture down here.
Yeah,
it's
I know.
Kind of like, about the only thing that you can say to is that Vader, but again, he wasn't fighting Dark Troopers either. But, Vader was just like one hand, just casually swinging his lightsaber. Like it was nothing for him. On the other hand, even though Luke was, making these wide sweeping movements, that was Luke's fighting style, number one, at that time. And number two, Luke still was going through those Dark Troopers with ease. I mean, when you look at the one Dark Trooper that Mando had to fight, it was like, you saw how powerful they were. And Luke is just going through, and he was almost cutting them up like the way the prequel era guys did the battle droids.
Oh, yeah.
That's actually totally what it reminded me of.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like, wow.
The big battle droids, yeah.
Yeah, and it was kind of weird to see that because it was another thing, because I had so many things going through my head when I first saw that scene, as we'll get to, of course, in our cantina thing.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that I really was going through my head was when I saw that it was almost like Luke now acting kind of like a prequel era Jedi. Because we had never seen Luke have to fight any kind of droid before.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that I remember anyway.
No.
So it was one of those things that you basically have a situation where Vader, on the other hand, though, he really had to, establish himself as more of the guy that was fearsome.
Well, let's get to the chats before I go into my dissertation.
Okay.
Dwight is back with us. What's up, man?
Hey,
he
Dwight.
says Vader. All others just gets compared to the Vader scene. He says spot on, Eric.
I see. I knew I liked this guy.
Who doesn't like Dwight?
Dwight's cool. We like Dwight.
Ronaldo says the Luke scene was very emotional for me. It was epic, and I always wanted to see Luke destroy some guys.
It's emotional for you? I'm going to make fun of you. Oh, wait, I can't do that till later.
Ronaldo also says, but Vader has that aura of horror that, thanks to the Rogue One soldiers, and I think it illustrates why Vader is feared in the galaxy, so I go for Vader's. Prototype Boba Fett, someone new. All right. There was a hallway scene in Clone Wars season 7 involving Darth Maul. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah,
that's right.
When he put up that shield and he was just like,
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a very good point.
Yeah,
I
and Ronaldo
just
brought up,
forgot that.
Yeah, he says, what about Maul in the last season of Clone Wars? Yep.
Man, you guys are just like...
So...
You always have our backs, though. That's what we like about you guys.
So here's the thing, though. So...
Yeah, it gives us a lot to talk about. That's why I like to chat so much.
Yeah. So here's the thing. So when I looked at this, I was like, okay, like you said, I originally had something else. And then it just kind of hit me. I was never really satisfied with that, though. And then something else kind of hit. And then this whole Mandalorian thing came up again. And I was like, everybody kept comparing it to the Vader scene. I was like, well, that's it. So let me just really break this down.
So let me ask you this before you get into all this. When you first saw the Luke scene, did you think of the Vader scene right away? Or was that something that occurred later?
Later, for me.
Okay.
For me, it was later. I mean, I think I was just in the shock.
Not for me.
I was just in the shock moment. I really in the shock moment like most people.
Well, that's true. I remember we were talking about it. It was kind of like, wait, is that... Because, I mean, at first we're thinking, well, maybe it's Wedge. Maybe,
Well, see, that's the thing, though. And I think, so when we look at it, and that's part of the reasons why I asked people about this question, because, see, with Vader, you kind of already knew he was there. Like in Rogue One, we've already saw him choke Krennic earlier. We've seen him pop up, so we knew Vader was around. But like in The Mandalorian, this is the time period where Luke Skywalker, we know he's present, but we've never seen him. And no one ever really thought that we would actually get a Luke Skywalker scene.
You know what this is like? This is exactly like the Maul cameo at the end of Solo.
Yeah.
In that sense.
Yeah, in that sense.
the sense
Absolutely.
that you're talking about.
Right. So I think for a lot of people were going with the Luke scene because, one, you didn't expect it. Two, it's like Ronaldo said, you always kind of wanted to see Luke just waste on some people. Just be that more all-powerful like Jedi that we all knew him to be, but we never got a chance to see that. So I can understand why a lot of people would go with the Luke scene. And the type, and because we actually got a chance to see him do something that we've never seen done before. That's the whole Force Crush thing. When he takes that one droid at the very end, he just like crushes him like a pop can.
And it was so satisfying to me.
It was, and especially when he used the black glove side too. So that was just made it even more like.
Well, and what was especially cool about that for Moff Gideon to see was the fact that he's touting these things as like, these are these ultra powerful, unstoppable.
Yeah, you're gonna die. Like you guys can put up a fight, but
right,
we know how this is gonna end.
And yet Luke just like kind of holds up his hand, and the thing just crushes underneath his force grip, and it's like, yeah, there's your unstoppable. Just like Titanic was an unsinkable ship, right? Yep. But then again, I go back and forth on that because it's like, well, that's also the reason why Gideon looked terrified, which we had never seen before.
From him. And so, but see, it juxtaposed to that with the Vader scene, when Vader pops up and, he ignites that red blade and everybody's just like, uh-oh.
Dude, the funniest thing to me was that one dude. It's him.
Yeah. So they're
that
all
gets me every time. Yeah. It's like, oh man, yes, everybody knows who Vader is. Like, it's him.
Well, yeah, and then the fact that it's just like, all right, everybody's like open fire, and the fact that he was met with such a barrage, and the fact that Vader just did it with one hand.
Yeah.
Like he's just one hand, he's just going.
Because I rewatched that. I totally rewatched that scene not that long ago. It wasn't even part of the movie. It was like, for some reason, I rewatched the scene. That's why it's so timely that you put this in here, because I was rewatching it, and that was the one thing that I noticed, was that, I mean, Vader was just being fired upon by just a ton of laser fire.
Yeah.
And the fact that he's just one hand deflecting all of it effortlessly.
Yeah, not a bit concerned at all.
Not concerned at all. Not even really slowing his pace, really.
So what made, and then you look at Luke, you know, I mean, he was doing some cool stuff, but he was very, you know, very much in control. The only thing about his thing, I think Luke's scene was longer than Vader's.
Yeah.
So that made it, you know, even more cool.
Well, he also, because if you think about it too, he had to go through more,
Yeah.
you know, more of the ship basically than, I mean, Vader
Yeah.
just had to go down a hallway pretty much, you know,
Yeah,
and
he
that was
in
it.
Yeah, he was just in that little hallway for the cargo bay. And he was like, all right. But I think one of the things that, you know, a lot of fans were saying about the whole Luke battle versus Vader was that, you know, with Luke, he had people kind of, because it was that one scene when they were actually watching it on the screen where he was actually kind of like surrounded by them. And the fact that he was actually able to just like, once again, like,
I mean, they were more powerful than the rebels. I mean, to fight off those dark troopers. Actually, yeah, they were like, that's right. I almost forgot about that scene, but that's right. He was surrounded.
Yeah,
and think of how powerful they were. That's the thing that I think a lot of times people miss when they're analyzing this is just how formidable each of these things by themselves would be. Now imagine being surrounded by them. And what was nice was he was using a combination of force powers and lightsaber.
Yeah, definitely. Now, I will say, I did like my heart did do the little pitter patter when he popped off the elevator, and you kind of saw him like run a little bit. He just kind of was sidestepping people, and I was just like, oh, like Luke is really, because before he's just kind of casually walking and kind of doing this stuff, but now he's really kind of like into it. And the fact that he's using like the heads of one just to sling it at the other one.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just like.
Well, the other thing that was really satisfying to me about that part two was the fact that, and I brought this up when we did our review, is that it wasn't one of those typical cliche things where the elevator doors open and they don't see him and then he pops out. Like, no, man, he wasn't scared of him at all.
Nah.
You know, elevator door pops open. He's standing there like, yeah, I don't even have to bother hiding from these things because they're just not powerful enough to stop me.
Exactly.
You know, it was very...
Well, but I think for me overall, I'm still going to go with Vader.
So am I.
And here's the reason why. It's the type of... it's the type of horror that, you know, it gives you a different kind of chill. And the fact that he's so merciless. See, the thing is, the difference is because you're dealing with droids, so you don't have that emotional connection.
That's true.
Vader's actually killing people. Like, he's walking down a hallway, and he's literally like, okay, he brings the guy up to the ceiling with the Force. Not only is he, like, choking him, but then he actually swipes his chest as he's walking, still deflecting the lasers. Then he does something that I thought was just brilliant, where he actually uses the Force and just takes all their guns away. So now they don't even have anything to shoot at him. So now they're just
honestly,
like sitting
that was
ducks.
One of the coolest.
That was the coolest
to me,
thing in the
that
world.
was one of the coolest things, and that's one of the examples of this is how I wish that they would use the Force.
Exactly.
This is a practical thing that anybody would do.
Yeah.
Instead of, I wish that they wouldn't always go for that whole Hollywood movie thing. Like, okay, we got to make it look good, or we got to make it look pretty, or whatever it is. You know, we got to give them the big blockbuster thing, right?
Right.
Do something that actually makes sense within the story. Now, granted, that looked cool. So, I mean, I guess it checks that box off. But at the same time, this is the way that somebody would actually use the Force if they had it.
This is the way. No. But the cool thing I did love about both scenes, which both directors did very, very well, was they captured the essence of the characters. So when you're watching Luke, who's a good guy, he's a Jedi, they're always talking about calm, peace, and that's exactly how he's moving. Very calmly. I mean, he's destroying stuff, but it's just like, it's
Very graceful.
it's very graceful. Yeah, very graceful. When you're looking at Vader, he's coming through with full power. Like, I'm not playing no games with you. Give me all your weapons. I'm stabbing you. And then he's like hacking at him.
Yeah, he's an unstoppable force.
You
That's
can't
basically
do
what it
anything
is.
with this
You
man.
can't, he's going to keep, he's like a juggernaut. He's going to keep moving forward.
Exactly.
And it's true. There's some minor differences, even though it was the same kind of thing. You had two powerful force users moving through a passage of some sort and vanquishing the enemies that they were there to destroy. But, as you pointed out, they did it in such a way that it actually honors the character.
Yeah.
Where it's not out of character. It almost emphasized their characters.
Exactly.
And that's true. And the other thing that I love that you brought up is the fact that with Vader, and this, I wasn't even really thinking of that. I was thinking more of the emotional impact and how you had to, really explain Vader, demonstrate his power, that kind of thing. But you're right. The horror aspect of it. And again, this goes into Vader's character. They did it very much like a horror movie.
Yeah.
It was kind of like, oh man, it was almost like a Jason Voorhees, Michael Myers kind of thing coming down.
It's that whole moment where you hear the creak of the docking ship.
Yeah.
You hear that creaking, and then because you see like the little shuttle approaching, so you just don't know what's really about to happen. Then you hear the little creaking, and then there's like nothing but darkness down the hallway. They're all like lined up down this hallway. They're probably expecting troopers. And then you just see this red blade just come out, and this kind of has that glow in that hallway, and you just have his silhouette. And Vader stands there almost like 7 feet tall. Mm-hmm. So it's like Shaquille O'Neal coming down a hallway, and he's about as big as Shaq too. Like, Vader's not like a skinny guy; like, his suit is huge. So he's moving down this hallway with this one single blade, and he's just blocking everything. But he's coming through with all this power, and not only is he, he's actually picking people up on the wall, hacking them, and then he grabs that one poor guy. He crushes him and he slings him against the wall. He's crushing him right there. Then he impales this guy through the blast door.
Oh,
I mean, he was just like, he was just crazy.
It was nuts.
Crazy.
Let's get to some of these chats. Ronaldo, back on Maul's point. Mauls is very good and a bit violent if you look at it correctly, but I'll put it in third place just because he doesn't have a lightsaber. He goes on to say, I think if Luke had killed stormtroopers instead of dark troopers, he would have felt a little strange and less heroic. I could probably hang with that.
I don't know about that.
But then again, I don't know. I mean, stormtroopers still. It's kind of like,
you don't have a face with them. They're a faceless.
Yeah, exactly.
thing.
In fact, I remember for a long time I thought they were droids.
Yeah, I thought they were like some like robots. Or,
I mean, when I first saw Star Wars back in like '77, I thought, oh, they're, it was only after a while that I sort of caught on. Well, of course, even that conversation. Oh, did you see the new T-16 coming out or whatever?
Dwight, one of the best parts, he was basically like, okay, that last shot I missed and it hurt. Give me these blasters. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's the thing that I think is that when you look at it, not only is it really fitting in their character by the overall look and just the feel, but even the way that they use their powers, even how they pretty much maneuvered through. I think it was a really subtle way of basically emphasizing the characteristics of each of these characters, which I think is one of the things that was really nice. It was subtle, but if you actually are looking for it, you can pick up on it.
And the other thing that I was watching some other comparisons on this, and they were actually right that he used a lot of Anakin from Revenge of the Sith fighting style. Like, as far as like he did the whole lightsaber behind his back blocking.
Yeah, that is a good point. Yep, that is a very good point. The fact that there was quite a bit of Anakin in that scene.
Yeah,
and that was a really nice transition. Now, of course, one of the criticisms is like, okay, wait a second. You have him fighting like this, And then a few scenes later,
when he fights Obi-Wan?
Yeah, but I mean,
Oh, yeah.
being the fact that it's like, guys, at some point, you
Yeah.
just have to look at the fact that one was made in 77,
Right.
the other one was made in like 2016?
16, 17.
Yeah, 16. So, I mean, you just have to understand that.
Mm-hmm.
It's no different than, like I said, I've been plowing through Star Trek Discovery. It's kind of the same thing. It takes place a decade before the original series. Now, I finished season 2. They did try to a little bit explain it, but it's, you know what? What are you going to do? Are you going to try to make a series that looks like the 1960s version?
Well, the other thing, at least for, to that argument, they did have an in-canon sort of response to that. And that's, because Vader knows it's Obi-Wan. The last time they actually dueled, he kind of took for granted that he could just beat Obi-Wan. He realized he could not. So now Obi-Wan, in theory, you got to think about it, he's older and wiser and probably more seasoned as far as a swordsman. So he's probably trying to take his time with him because he doesn't want, there are no second chances. I mean, he's already got on his second legs, if you will. So Vader is probably going at Obi-Wan very cautiously because he's like, okay, I know what you can do. The whole reason why I'm in this suit is because of you. You really think about it. So Vader's probably going at Obi-Wan in the New Hope very carefully.
Well, the other thing that I think too, it goes along with that, is that they were really, it wasn't so much that they were dueling, they were really having more of a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
The duel was kind of secondary in a way. And the other thing too is that with that whole older and wiser, that was one of the in-canon explanations for why the prequel Jedi fought differently from, I mean, besides the fact that the Jedi hadn't been around for a while.
Right.
The more powerful, I guess for lack of a better term, that you get in the Force, you don't have to do all that stuff.
Right.
You learn more of economy of motion,
Mm-hmm.
things of that nature. I don't have to do all this crazy stuff to accomplish what I need to accomplish.
Right. And you even saw that in the prequels with Dooku. Dooku didn't do a whole lot of those flips.
Right. And because he was ultra powerful. And
Exactly.
add to that the fact that you could also make the argument that in the Force, now because you're in a higher level, right, you're basically even deeper into the Force, you can sense things a lot more.
Yeah, that was one of the things that they brought up about Luke, is the fact that he actually learned how to slow things down, like almost using the Force to kind of move things in slow mo. So he could react to a lot of stuff a whole lot fast. It seemed like he was moving really fast, but it was more so the fact that he slowed everything else, kind of the world around him, down. So he could move the way he needed to move.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that when you're doing that, and that's why you don't have to do this. See, I think that in the prequel era, especially the Jedi that were knights, maybe not so much masters, but knights, they are relying more on the lightsaber fighting style than they are on the Force. Whereas I think that when you become more of a master, grandmaster, now you're relying more on the Force than the actual lightsaber skill.
True.
Because even Palpatine, I mean, if you look at, and actually that was one of the reasons why I love the whole Mace Palpatine duel. Because even though Palpatine was more powerful, technically, it's not by a super amount. I mean, fighting Mace was kind of like fighting Yoda in a sense. So you saw that their dueling was a little bit different than, say, like an Obi-Wan Anakin kind of thing.
Right. Dwight asked a really good question. Who do you think will win, Prime Vader or Prime Luke?
Well, that actually depends. Dwight, are you talking about Prime Vader as in Vader before he gets in the suit? Or Prime Vader as in Vader after the suit? If it's Prime Vader before the suit, then Vader all the way. Because we know, straight from Lucas's mouth, and I know Jason is probably going to comment on this. He writes paragraphs, actually. Very interesting, detailed analysis of everything that we talk about. And then he brings his own stuff in. That's why I can't wait till he's able to actually join us live again. But he's probably going to say stuff about this. But essentially, Lucas, straight from his mouth on one of the commentaries, said that had Anakin never been in the suit, he would have been more powerful than anybody. Now, of course, he switched to the dark side, which gives him an initial power boost. So I'm going to go with if Vader had kept rising in the dark side but never was in the suit, because the suit basically was somewhat cumbersome and pretty much limited him.
Mm-hmm.
He actually had to relearn his whole fighting style, actually.
Right.
Which is one of the in-canon explanations they give, too, is that, well, he had to learn how to fight differently. That's why Vader fights differently from Anakin. But if you're talking about, like, pre-suit, but post, I'm Darth Vader now, then him. But we all know that Luke ends up fulfilling that promise that Anakin failed by being now the Grandmaster. So I guess probably have to give it to Luke. But it's kind of tough because, you start reading those Vader comics and stuff like that, man. I mean, it's...
I'm still going to go with Vader.
You think so?
Yep.
So you're going to argue with Lucas. Okay, that's fine.
Well, I mean, only because, I mean, granted, I think that Vader, honestly, I just think it's basically experience.
Well, but Dwight was talking about prime Luke. When he means prime, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Dwight, but he means like at his prime, like kind of at his zenith.
Right. But that's what I'm saying. But like, you got to look at the standpoint of who did Luke really go against if we're talking about like a duel, though?
Well, now that a lot of that depends, because here's where it gets sticky, everybody. Because you have to go, are we talking about Prime Expanded Universe, Luke?
Oh my God.
Or are we talking... No, I mean, this is a legitimate point. And the reason why it's a legitimate point is because The Mandalorian actually represents the first time we've seen Prime Luke. I don't necessarily count the sequel trilogy Luke as Prime because he was out of the Force for a couple of movies. And then he jumps in.
So Dwight says after the suit.
After the suit. Yeah, then I have to definitely give it to Luke on that one. We're talking Prime. And that's in either universe. Now, I know what you're saying, because we just have The Mandalorian is the only example of new canon Prime Luke.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even know if that's really Prime yet, because he's not quite... I would consider...
just probably got to the rank of Master.
Yeah, I mean, I would consider Prime Luke probably around 15 years after Return of the Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably where he... kind of like in between Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, look at how powerful he is. I mean, guys, remember that Luke actually projected himself across the universe and pretty much kind of vanquished, to a degree, the First Order. I mean... this guy is extremely powerful.
Oh, yeah.
And in the expanded universe, it's even worse. He's throwing planets out of orbit. He's bringing down Star Destroyers. He's doing all this stuff. I mean, because he's become so powerful in the Force that it's almost like... remember,
he's a god,
he is the only one who has ever really, truly achieved... I mean, they call Yoda the Grandmaster, but really Luke is the true Grandmaster of the Force. Vader, Anakin never got to that level. Now, if you go on the flip side of that, though, Vader is the only one, canonically, who has actually conjured up red Force lightning, which is even more powerful than Palpatine's Force lightning. I know Jason's going to come in on this. But that's basically... and that's it. But before we get to too much of this, I want to get to this thing that Dwight said too. One of the best parts, he was basically like, okay, that last shot I missed. Oh, we did that one already.
Yeah.
Where's the other one? Well, I guess that wasn't the other one. Oh, here's one from Ronaldo. Prime Vader without the suit. He's probably the most powerful Jedi ever. Yeah. That's where I'm going with this. It's kind of like if you take him out of the suit, but he's Vader, well, then you almost have to go, is it Prime? It's like if Anakin had reached his potential, this we know for a fact, he would have been more powerful than Luke. The Force DNA would have been more pure, for one thing.
Right.
For another thing, it's kind of like now you're starting to get into all kinds of craziness because you have old canon versus new canon. And then you have Anakin is going to the dark side as Vader, but then he's in a suit. And then, you know what I mean? It's like there's all kinds of crazy stuff.
So the reason why we, for those who may not know, the reason why we keep bringing up the suit aspect is because, so if he's in the suit, he doesn't have a whole lot of tissue, a whole lot of his original, limbs and things of that nature. The Force flows through all living things, so the less living tissue you have, the less you have the ability to kind of, I guess, conjure it up.
That's part of what actually makes Vader's power so crazy. And actually, Lucas brought that up in the commentary too, is that look at how powerful he is without as much living tissue.
Exactly.
Now imagine how much he would have been.
Yeah, if he had all his limbs and...
Exactly. But then, of course, the other part of it too is that the suit itself encumbers.
Mm-hmm.
Or...
limits him.
Yeah, it limits him as far as what he can do and his movements. And, there was... Actually, in the old canon, there was a great book called The Rise of Darth Vader, which showed him getting used to it. And the first time he went to carry out another Order 66 kill on a Jedi, he almost got his butt handed to him by a Padawan. Mm-hmm. It was hilarious. But I love that because it showed that, hey, he had to learn how to fight and do everything in this suit. And then, of course, he goes back and he just, cleans house and becomes the Vader we know. But the new canon, Lords of the Sith, deals a lot with that as well. So, we get that. See, Ronaldo says, Luke literally crushed Kylo's pride. That's funny. And then Dwight's, I guess I didn't think of Anakin being Vader before the suit at all. But technically, Obi-Wan never battled Anakin, but Vader.
True.
That is true. That is actually a very good point. He really didn't battle Anakin.
Right.
But then again, that was actually acknowledged anyway, because Yoda gave that whole thing before he went off to kill him. Like, hey,
Consume, your Padawan or your apprentice no longer is consumed by Darth Vader.
Yeah. It was kind of like adding that truth to the whole lie. Well, Darth Vader killed your father or whatever. It's like, well, what I told you was true from a certain point of view. Well, that was Yoda basically giving him the idea. Mm-hmm. Like, hey, I know you're having problems killing this guy that was basically your brother, but if you look at it a certain way,
right,
he's not really your brother anymore. He's this Darth Vader guy now. Right. So now you're good. Go kill him.
Right.
And that was all Obi-Wan needed. Like, well, all right. Now, granted, he was still trying to turn him, but... Mm-hmm. And then Dwight says, that's true. As far as canon goes, there is no Prime Luke. Exactly. Not yet. We're getting our first glimpses of it at the end of The Mandalorian, but we don't really know yet. That's why I'm having a hard time answering this question, because you got old canon versus new canon. You got, okay, where is Luke exactly fitting in? Are we dealing with Anakin in the suit or not in the suit? I mean, there's so many variables that you have to consider that I think that before we can really definitively answer this question again, because this question was kind of answered in the old canon, well, which really wasn't canon. Lucas never really considered the expanded universe canon. Right. He did canonize certain things as part of what made it such a pain and why Disney decided, you know what, let's just start from scratch and make it all canon.
Right.
So that part's cool. But I don't know. We'll have to see. But again, everybody knows where everybody's standing here in the chats, and of course you guys know where we're standing, but what do you guys, if you're watching the rebroadcast of this thing, what are you guys thinking as far as the best lightsaber ending? Is it the Luke Skywalker ending from The Mandalorian Season 2? Or is it the Darth Vader one from Rogue One? Let us know in the comments section. All right. It's time to, of course, I've been way ahead of everybody. I've gotten my drink ahead of time. I know you got yours, so let's go to the cantina and just talk some general Star Wars stuff. Okay, so now we're going to the section of the show where we talk about how a bunch of Lucasfilm people are kind of in trouble. Once again, I mean, we're going to kick off 2020, even though these stories technically came out last year.
Right.
Right? I mean, but they're carrying over into this year. So Some people are in a bit of trouble.
People got some coal in their stockings.
Yeah, exactly. So what's this first one?
So the first one is Patty Jennings. All right. So Patty Jennings is the director of the Rogue Squadron film. And a lot of people are concerned about the Rogue Squadron film because of the mixed reviews, but a lot of people are kind of downing the new Wonder Woman movie. So they're wondering, okay, no pun intended, if the Wonder Woman movie is bad, what is Star Wars Rogue Squadron going to be?
Yeah, the whole idea behind this is, look, I don't know where you guys stand. I saw the Wonder Woman movie. It had a lot of problems. It was kind of borderline on terrible, actually.
Mm-hmm.
The story was cool. It started out actually good, and then just completely fell apart.
Yeah.
And pretty much universally, on my personal Facebook page, if you guys search me out, I wrote this whole review on it, which is sad because actually the first Wonder Woman movie I consider the best of the DC movies, hands down.
Mm-hmm.
So after this travesty called Wonder Woman 1984 comes out, they actually announced they're doing a Wonder Woman 3, which we're all like, well, okay, Patty Jenkins better hopefully make it a little bit more like the first one. But then we find out, and this is where this is coming in, is the fact that if you really go back and look at it, Patty Jenkins actually took over Wonder Woman from another director. I forgot about this. And the story and everything was already kind of in place when this happened. So really, she's getting a lot of credit for the success of the first Wonder Woman movie, at least a little bit more probably than she really should. So now everybody is wondering, well, great. Now, personally, I don't think that they're going to rip this movie away from her. Look, she had a father who was like this fighter pilot / kind of war hero. You know, this is a very personal project for her. They've already announced it. It would look really bad if they took it away.
Well, I mean, like I said, we've known that to happen with Solo, with...
Yeah, but I mean, that's the thing. But see, that was early on. Now that you've had, The Last Jedi... Because remember, while all that Solo drama was going on, The Last Jedi hadn't been released yet.
Right, but I think what a lot of people are fearing is that, because once again, with the Star Wars community being so divided right now, even still, I mean, they're getting some people coming back because of The Mandalorian, especially with 2 great seasons. The biggest thing is like, okay, if this is going to be once again, the next movie from this franchise.
So you're saying basically it would be better to change out, or do whatever they have to do versus risk another bad film.
Exactly, because...
But here's my counter to that.
Okay.
It goes along with what you're saying, but I think what's more likely to happen is what happened with Rogue One. You get somebody in there to kind of fix it while it's being made. So you don't fully take it away from the director. You just tell the director, hey, man, sit a couple scenes out here. We're going to bring this other guy to come in and direct like 40% of the film. And, then everything will be cool. Because remember, everybody forgets that Gareth Edwards was running into the same hot water that Lord and Miller were. To the point where a lot of people were really worried. Because remember the whole big reshoot thing?
Well, yeah, I mean, especially like all those shots that we saw in the trailers didn't even make it in the movie.
Exactly. It's like the whole first trailer of Rogue One was a complete lie.
Yeah.
And you're just like, okay, so what did I end up seeing? I mean, granted, don't get me wrong. Rogue One is probably my favorite of the Disney era films. But that said, it did have its issues with being made. So I think that rather than rip the movie away, which would really look bad, and also, if you think about it, she has a lot of experience as far as with her dad being a fighter pilot, and, I'm sure a lot of this is based on, she took some of it from the Rogue Squadron story, some of the comics, the books that have come out, but she also took a lot of things from her dad's personal experiences.
Right.
So,
yeah.
I mean, unless you give it to like, who's the guy that took over Top Gun after Tony Scott died? I mean, I know Tom Cruise basically is really spearheading it, but they got somebody else in. Chat it in if you guys know.
But see, I'm also thinking about, because you saw what happened to Colin Trevorrow with 9. You see what I'm saying? Like, it's not, and that's one of those things where it's like you don't know, like, okay, if I scrap this now and bring in a JJ to do it, then it's like, okay, But then you see what she was really going to do. Now you're like, man, I wish I would have saw the Patty version. But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I can see that happening. Just like I wish I had seen the Lord Miller version of Solo now.
Exactly. So I think this is once again, it's like a thing when you're, how much grace do we give directors when it comes to, and especially when it comes to, it's a little bit different when you coming up with something like, okay, so I finally did see Knives Out.
Wow, you hadn't seen it in all this time?
Right. I finally saw
Really?
Yeah. Finally saw Knives Out. But so I'm like, okay, once again, great film directed by Rian Johnson. So, okay, now that was just kind of its own thing.
Mm-hmm.
But you're dealing with characters that people have already, or events that are beloved by certain people. So you're dealing with a Star Wars community that's, of course, beloved by the Star Wars fans, and you're talking about Rogue Squadron. All right. Well, there might be a section of people who really, really love Rogue Squadron. So you're ruining it for them if it doesn't come off well. Now, some people may not know that much about Rogue Squadron, so it may be cool for them. The whole thing is, though, when you're dealing with something like Knives Out, if it flopped, it flopped. Like, okay, no one cares. But like Wonder Woman, like people care about Wonder Woman, especially when you already had a successful movie to begin with.
That's the worst part of it.
So it's like
you're
you
coming
can't,
off of probably what's the best DC film, and you give us this.
So it's kind of like, all right, now if you botch this up, and this is a big franchise, what are you going to do to our beloved Star Wars? You see what I'm saying? So,
well, and I mean, from that standpoint, maybe I can understand. But the only problem that I have with this line of thinking is that, and this is the case with Colin Trevorrow, I sometimes wonder really what was behind that. Because one of my biggest issues is that, are you really going to keep looking at the box office performance or the critical reviews of all these directors' last films? And really, that's what you're going to do? I mean, I get it from a business standpoint, you sort of have to, but the point is, like, look, if you hire a director, it's going to be based on a couple of things. Now, granted, Patty Jenkins, she did the first Wonder Woman. She didn't have as much to do with what I think she gets a lot of credit for, but she did actually direct the movie, though. So even though the story and a lot of things were already in place, she did have to bring that to life. She also had, I forgot what other movies. I'm really bad at this, but if you guys chat it in if you know. She's directed a couple other pretty cool movies. It's like, look, hire the directors based on their directing style and the stories that they bring to life and things that they tell. Don't base it on what the critics thought or what box office, stuff is based on. And you really can't, I mean, the Wonder Woman thing, it's like, yeah, okay, everybody was kind of, including the fans, are like, all right, well, it wasn't the worst thing in the world, but it wasn't a good follow-up to this.
Right. And like, so to Ronaldo's point, and I was about to bring this up.
Ronaldo, he's chatting in a lot, isn't he?
But my question is, I haven't seen the Wonder Woman, the second one yet.
Really?
No, I haven't. So my question is, what was it the story or was it the acting?
Well, Ronaldo says, I don't think Patty will lose her position as director. Although Wonder Woman 84 was not good, it was awful. She worked together with Jeff Johns, and it is possible that he also had responsibility. That's a good point. The problem with Wonder Woman is they had a pretty good first act. As far as all the stuff on the Scara, whatever the little Amazonian homeworld is, that was kind of cool. The problem is...
the mascara.
Mascara, that's it. The problem is that pretty much, and I'm trying to remember all the things that I said about it, but it was mostly a very disjointed film. Pedro Pascal's thing was just like over-the-top nonsense. I mean, it's not his fault. He did what he It's kind of the Jar Jar thing, you know? It's kind of like, look,
to do.
Yep, this is how they wanted me to play it, and this is what I did. But the story should have been, like a subplot. Cheetah should have been the main thing. And Kristen Wiig did a great job as Cheetah, which I was actually skeptical about. But she captured the nerdy part, which we all knew that would be the case. But she actually, kind of before she was full-blown Cheetah and was just like confident and kind of had the powers. And then, you know, they would violate their own things all the time with this wish stone thing. I mean, spoiler alert. But it was just poorly done. You know, there was all these things that were just, it was very disjointed and very boring also.
Okay, so how much of it do you think the failure of it was due to the writing and story versus the directing?
Well, that's the big thing, see, because the problem when you're dealing with directing is directors do this all the time. They make the writers rewrite scenes. So the director has the power to do this. When they're not doing it, you know, there's an issue. It's like Steve Trevor's whole thing. Like, he gets into a jet, and it's like suddenly he knows how to fly, and the whole invisible jet thing was so dumb. And, I mean, there were just so many, you know, really bad things. In fact, let me see. I'm going to do this because, you know, this is a live stream, and we actually have time to do things like this.
Well, while you do that, I'm going to read some of the other comments.
All right, well.
So Ronaldo says, in addition, it is true that she was not responsible for the story of the first Wonder Woman. If she was responsible, I think he was trying to say she was responsible for the execution. Ronaldo also says, and without a good execution, you cannot make a good movie. Facts. He also says she also directed Monster, which was great. Yeah,
Monster, that was a good one. Okay, so I say, I was really excited. The introduction of Cheetah in the films was a cool prospect, and thought maybe Pedro Pascal's character would add a bit of cohesive subplot that could be utilized and connected in future films. I was wrong. First act of the movie was actually cool. This made what followed even more disappointing. You have to understand, I still feel the first Wonder Woman is a well-done film that actually stands as a good drama with some comedy, as well as being a good movie. So what went wrong? To put it succinctly, execution was sloppy and the story grew disjointed. Pedro Pascal's character and story were more the primary plot, and Cheetah was there just to provide an exciting fight sequence. I thought Kristen Wiig was really good as a socially awkward woman trying to make her way through life, as well as the pulling off the transformation and, oh man, hold on, into it. Okay. Let me see what else. It was when the actual Cheetah character came up that it felt a bit strained and was unnecessarily over the top. Yeah, I mean, and that was basically the gist of it, is the fact that it just grew into this disjointed mess, and you really didn't know what movie you were watching after a while. And like I said, there were some aspects of it that I thought were really good. That's one of the things that kept me interesting, was I kept going, okay, well, I'll let this go. It'll develop. And I remember Doug, you know, he wrote to me, he was just like, that was awful. I think he hated it more than I did. I didn't think that it was truly terrible. I think the reason why people are reacting as like, oh, this is like an awful movie and all this, is because of what they expected after the first one. The first one being arguably the best one of the DCEU, and now you get this. You know, and there's a cool cameo at the end, which is, you know, I won't spoil that for anybody, but it's worth watching all the way through the mid-credits, guys. But that's the reason why I think that where Lucasfilm and Kathleen Kennedy in particular might be going like, oh man, I don't want the fans to turn against, like, I don't want her to do something with this and make a bad decision here, especially because it's another franchise film. From that standpoint, I think that it would be a good thing. But at the same time, you don't really know all the variables involved.
True. You know, like we always say, though, this is a results-based industry.
Well, and it's also like, if you get all the credit, you also get all the blame.
Exactly. You know,
I mean, it's kind of like, you know, you have, you know, like Jeff Johns, you know, like Ronaldo pointed out. I mean, he did work with her, but it's kind of like, okay, well, how much was his? But look, if it's successful, she's going to get all the credit.
Mm-hmm.
So if it bombs, she's getting the credit.
Exactly.
So it's one of those things that I think that the actors were doing what they could with what they had, but it was just kind of messed up. They really should have stuck with the plot of Cheetah and the Wishstone and how she got it and how it, because if they had done that, I think it would have been a little bit better of a film. And it was actually a lot of the stuff with Steve Trevor in it was great. In fact, one of the things that I will say that's really good about the movie was they flip-flopped the fish out of water thing. So in the first movie, it was Diana that was the fish out of water.
Mm-hmm.
And, Steve had to kind of guide her through and all this other stuff. Well, even though Steve is from, like the U.S. and he's aware of this stuff, now he's all of a sudden in 1984. She's been there the whole time. Now he's the fish out of water.
Right.
And they could have really made that stupid and messed it up. But I thought they actually did really well. They didn't do it cliched, and they didn't just repeat what they did with her. They made it a little bit different.
So, do you think that? I guess my thing is if you're basing things on your last film, and especially if it's a major thing like Wonder Woman or a Marvel movie or something like that, and it's not even by the critics, but by critics and fans, who all say that's the thing. Like critics and fans are both like, "Yo, this sucks." And you're going into a Star Wars. Now you're jumping from DC to now Star Wars. As a fan, are you confident?
I'm comfortable.
Okay.
I'm totally comfortable because I don't necessarily think that all the conditions that surrounded Wonder Woman 84 would necessarily repeat themselves in this. The other thing is that I think that she would actually have, because this is such a personal project, I mean, it's Wonder Woman, man. I mean, anybody that's going into it, I mean, unless they're like some Wonder Woman fan, is going to go into it a little differently. This is an actual personal project to her, something that she knows something about. I think that it's in good hands. She's a really good director.
But with that, okay, it's personal for her. I get that. But that doesn't always mean it translates to Star Wars.
No, but I mean, she's still like probably in the top 10 best directors that are out today. I mean, nobody can really take that away from her. I mean, she has a bad movie that, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see like interviews that she does, like if stuff is going to come out that, hey, I really wanted to do this, but they wouldn't let me, and we don't know.
Because, I mean, like, to your point, and the only reason why I'm asking this question the way I'm asking is because, to your point you made earlier, you said, well, okay, as a director, you have the power to change if you see that things aren't working. The fact that you didn't realize that a vast majority of this movie was not working, you let it go. Why?
Yeah, I don't.
That's what, as a fan, my question.
And again, you can also use the Rian Johnson comparison because he's another really amazing director, and look at what he did. and Kathleen Kennedy's got to be thinking that in the back of her mind, like, oh man, I don't want another Rian Johnson issue on my hands. But
right.
But at the same time, you also have to look at the fact that, and this is where I think that sometimes Kathleen Kennedy is too hot or too cold. They just left Rian Johnson alone. I mean, she was all over like Gareth Edwards and even JJ to a degree, right? But, I mean, to the point where she was almost micromanaging. She almost overstepped her bounds. She forgot she was not a producer and she was a studio head. But then with Rian Johnson, it's kind of like, oh yeah, he's working on this thing, and it seemed like there was nothing.
No oversight.
Yeah, no oversight at all. And I think that that's part of where it's a team effort. Like I said, I don't think that the failure of Wonder Woman 84 falls strictly on Patty Jenkins' shoulders. I just don't. I mean, yeah, she probably made some really dumb decisions. She could have ordered some rewrites. We don't know what the studio heads were saying. We don't know what anybody else was saying. We don't know. I mean, we can go by the fact that it's like, well, this is the first one she kind of did on her own without it being set up like the first one was. And she says she already has stories for a Wonder Woman 3 and 4. So she's obviously invested in it. But that's where I think that you have to look at some things. The other thing, too, is that maybe you do bring her in to direct this, but maybe, you give Favreau a call and you say, hey,
watch this one.
we give you, a truckload of cash. Could you just go and sort of, I don't know, oversee this? Or maybe bring Filoni in to do that?
Okay.
I mean, there's a lot of things. Oh, wow, the chat's gone a little bit crazy.
Yeah, let's go with, all right, we're going to start with your mom. She said, if there were a Thrawn movie, who would you like to direct?
Oh, yeah, Thrawn. Well, this is a good question that may seem like it's not part of this conversation, but it is. Because it's one of those things that you have to be very, very careful about who you get to direct stuff.
Sure.
So that said, I mean, Rian Johnson.
Hands down, right?
Right, I mean, come on. I don't know. It's interesting too because like a lot of these other guys, like you get like a John Campea type dude. These guys are up on all these people.
All the different directors.
All the different directors and can name like the 60 films that, they've done or whatever. And it's kind of like, I mean, I'm into that to a degree, but it's sort of like I'm not. I mean, I'll judge these films based on it. And I'm aware of who the directors are when, the stuff is released, but not every one of them. There's a lot of movies that I see where, I don't know who the director is and I don't care. I'm more interested in the story, maybe who's in it. There's only a handful of directors I really care about. Now, that said, yeah, Thrawn you have to handle really, really carefully. That's another one. Like, I'd give somebody Rogue Squadron. I mean, granted, I know it's got its insane rabid fans too, but Thrawn, you really can't mess up Thrawn. I mean, Thrawn's somebody that you have to give that to more of a heavyweight. So what I'm going to do is what every good host does. I'm going to toss that one out to the chat. And then the comment section. Who do you guys think should direct the Thrawn movie? For me, if I have to go into, because if I can't name the directors, I can at least name the movies. Who actually would probably be good was Steven Spielberg.
I was thinking him.
Spielberg would actually be good. I'm not just saying that because he's like a famous director everybody knows. I mean, he's somebody that I think could really handle the Thrawn character really, really well.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that would be a really cool thing to do. As far as some of the other guys, I mean, it just has to be a director that understands the character. Because I think that's one of the problems that we've been having in the Star Wars universe is that the reason why Favreau and Filoni are so successful is because they really get this stuff. And that's where I think that, who was it? Was it Deborah Chow that basically was all like, or no, it wasn't her. Was it? Who was the one that said, I want to live in Star Wars? And that may have been Patty Jenkins.
No, that was Hetland, I think.
Oh, yeah. Leslie Hetland.
Leslie
Yeah.
Hetland.
Yeah. See, now, I don't know, but I'm saying get somebody like her maybe. Because you need somebody that really understands the characters and understands the universe. And I think that's the biggest problem is that a lot of these people are taking the characters and they're saying, okay, they're comparing it to somebody, say, in just a normal movie franchise, right? But it's like you can't do that. I mean, you really have to understand the universe because you have to understand the context of these characters. And I think that's where a lot of the directors are falling short. So he says, And I think Patty will put a lot of emotional scenes in Rogue Squadron, considering what it means to her. Absolutely. Ronaldo also goes on to say that cameo, he's talking about Wonder Woman 84, was amazing. And then he says, Ronaldo's chatted a lot since we last checked this. If it wasn't for Cheetah, it would be Wonder Woman's version of Superman Returns. That's actually kind of what it reminded me of, honestly, was a little bit of that. That it kind of had that vibe to me. I'm also comfortable. I think she will do a good job. Recently, she acknowledged that the movie was very long, which I agree with, indicating that she may be learning from her mistakes. And then he says, I don't know why, but I'd like to see Christopher Nolan direct a Thrawn movie. That would be an interesting choice. And I think that a lot of that comes from, there's that detective side of Batman, the darkness, but the hero, the tug of war. There are certain parallels that you can draw to Thrawn with that. But yeah, I just think that whoever it is needs to be somebody that really gets the universe, that it's not a job to them. And they're not just researching the characters or whatever. Like, they really know this stuff. On the other hand, you kind of had that in The Rise of Skywalker with JJ and, I keep forgetting the guy's name that co-wrote it with him. Mm-hmm. The guy that co-wrote it with him was a canon junkie. So, there is that. Yeah, there's a handful of people out there that I think could probably handle Thrawn really well, but you just have to be really careful.
I would say Courtney A. Kemp.
Oh, who are you looking up?
No, I mean, no, she directs the show Power.
Oh, okay.
But I like what she does, like how she uses like the different, like she'll look at psychology. So she'll look at stuff like a person being a sociopath, and she'll like, okay, how would I play this person? And then the twists and turns that she brings into that particular series, I think that could fit in Thrawn's kind of world, where Thrawn is very cerebral. He's very calm. He's very calculating. And I just think if she is a Star Wars fan, or if she can adapt that into Star Wars, I think she would do a great job with that.
Well, because the other question you got to answer too is who writes it. It's not just who directs it; it's who writes it.
And that's another thing too. She's a really good writer too.
I'd say get the Cobra Kai guys. As crazy as that sounds, I mean, if those guys are even half Star Wars fans as they are Cobra or Karate Kid fans,
yeah.
I mean, the writing on that show is insanely good.
Absolutely.
And it's because they know every little nuance of that franchise. Mm-hmm. That they're bringing a lot of stuff in, and they know how to bring in fan service without it being so on the nose. You know,
right.
Those guys really get somebody like that. If you don't get them, get somebody like that. That's where I think you have to do. Oh, Ronaldo says his name is Chris Terrio.
Mm.
And yes, I know, yeah. He's done some, or what else? It's so funny. A lot of times I blank on this stuff. Like, I'll know this stuff, before, and then we go on, I get relaxed. I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't remember anything at this point. But yeah, it's just one of those things that I think that, and that's what goes into this, is that I think the mistake that Lucasfilm makes is they announce all these directors and they hype them and they do all this stuff, and then they're like, oh, well, they're not really able to do what we want them to do, so they got to go.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. It's just, like I said, I think it's one of those things that it takes a looking at, just because, like I said, it's the first movie, that we're getting.
Yeah, I know.
That's
true.
What I'm saying. Like, it's the first movie after Rise of Skywalker.
That's true. It is very important.
And everybody's just kind of like, okay, even though it's not like a saga film or anything like that, but it's still like,
this is the one where they're going to be like, okay, we're going to give the movies another shot.
Yeah, and just
if
like
this one disappoints,
yeah, we just rather just keep.
Then Star Wars becomes a TV franchise.
Exactly.
And that would be a shame.
Yeah, especially like when you have people like, Filoni and Favreau, who I will eventually would love to see them do actual film.
Well, but then again, it could also be like a Netflix original. I mean, the thing that's pretty funny, especially with Warner Brothers releasing all their main movies on HBO Max in 2021, and AMC every other day is threatening bankruptcy. I mean, it kind of sucks, but I can honestly see that I don't think it's going to be the death of movies. I think it's going to be the death of theatrical presentations. To where it becomes like it goes the way of the drive-in almost. Even though that's making a comeback, I think with streaming, with a lot of the stuff that we're seeing, you're not really seeing a difference anymore between movies and television and all this other stuff. They can easily just make movies, full-length feature movies, and put them on Disney Plus. And that would actually bring an audience to it, and then it's not as costly. It's not, of course, they're not going to reap the same benefits. They're not going to make $2 billion.
Right.
And that's the other thing. It's kind of like a lot of these theaters have to face that. It's like, what do you do when you have something like Black Widow that you've spent $1 gazillion on, and you have to put that in theaters to make the money back? But it's not like everybody's going to go flocking to the theaters anytime soon.
Right.
Sure, they're open now, but at least in Michigan,
Yeah.
not yet anyway, you can't buy concessions.
Or I would say like in certain areas that you can.
In certain areas, you can do a full-blown thing, and in others you can't. And even once, the vaccine will get around or whatever, but it's kind of like a post that I put on Facebook, which, of course, a lot of people misunderstood. But
hot water like Pablo.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, well, it's not as crazy of a reaction as some of the other things that I posted innocently and just gotten blasted for. But I was like, everybody's acting like as soon as the calendar switched to 2021, the
pandemic goes away.
Yeah, that magically everything was, I can't wait till 2020 is gone. Yay, 2021, here we come. And I'm like, okay, realize that the first half, maybe more, but at least the first half of 2021 is going to look a lot like 2020. And that includes for entertainment. And that's why you have all these theaters like scrambling to make money. You have the Hollywood studios that are trying to figure out what to do because it's not like, it's 2021, good, everything's going to be magically cool again. I mean, it's going to take some time. Even once the vaccine gets around, you're talking early to like spring to late spring at the earliest in order for there probably to be enough herd immunity and stuff like that. And even after that, it's not like people are going to be necessarily feeling too safe. I mean, sure, you're going to get all the people. I mean, look at what people have been doing now. But it's going to be a while before things return to what we would all call normal.
True.
And so I think that you have to wonder, I think that this is going to play into the Rogue Squadron movie because it's coming out in 2023. So I think around that time, maybe if, things haven't totally changed by then, people might just want to go see it because they just want to go out and see a movie. It's experience that again.
Alrighty.
Oh, yeah. When he was talking about Chris Terrio, that was a co-writer, by the way, of Rise of Skywalker. I should have clarified that when Ronaldo put that. Then Ronaldo also says he worked in Batman v Superman, really good, and Justice League, awful. I'm really curious on
that director's cut.
The Zack Snyder one that's coming on HBO Max this year, though. Because, they've shot a ton of new scenes for everybody's saying it's basically going to be a different movie.
Yeah, I can't wait to see that, too.
Now, here's a question, though. This is actually, and this just occurred to me. Is it necessarily out of the question, then, to get a different cut of A Rise of Skywalker? Or even some of the other things? If we can accept the fact that Justice League was out in theaters, and then you even had the extended version, because remember, as it stands right now, we have the theatrical version, and then we have the extended cut, or whatever they call it. Okay? Now they're going and they got the Zack Snyder cut that's coming out, that they're actually releasing, and they've shot a ton of new footage for it. They've done all this stuff to where it's almost going to be a different movie now. Could that then open the door for Star Wars to be softly rebooted in some cases?
But you still have to answer the question, though, which one is the real one?
Well, I mean, I'm just saying that if they're doing that with Justice League,
Right, but I'm just saying,
everybody's
like,
going to consider the Zack Snyder cut the real one. You know what it's going to be? It's whichever one they like better.
exactly.
I mean,
but
if it sucks, everybody would be like, well,
but see, my thing is, it can't, like, you can add scenes too, but you can't change the main story though. So you can't have like a Star Wars like Rise of Skywalker thing, but then like, okay,
they don't have to. Remember the George Lucas cut actually had like 40 minutes of extra footage and it,
right?
well,
but
whatever
I mean,
was rumored anyway.
yeah, I mean that's what I'm saying. But I mean, like, if you can't change, like, oh well, Palpatine never came back. You some like the things that you need to fix with Rise of Skywalker, it's
well, they could get some of the actors back, reshoot. Palpatine was in a few scenes that were key, and obviously you'd have to redo the whole ending, but you could technically.
I mean, the opening crawl has Palpatine. I mean, like, that's
well, you could just hit the delete button and retype.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, that's what I'm saying. Like, you might as well just reshoot the whole movie.
What I'm saying is, and that's what I think the Zack Snyder thing is going to do. I think people are actually underestimating this, is that when you start opening the door to introducing a vastly, from what I understand and have read about this thing, it changes the story. It completely changes the story. It's not the same movie that we all saw in theaters. And if that's true, and that proves to be successful, I think that could start to bleed over into other franchises.
I will have to see it then before I make that determination.
Well, I think we all do. Not only do we have to see it, but I think we also have to see the effects of it. It's going to be one of those things where if enough people sort of get behind that, it's kind of like the de-aging technology. Look at how fast that's moving.
Yeah, but I mean, like, technology versus, like, changing an entire story.
There's a huge thing that's been going around that's absolutely true, is the ethical nature of doing this, because the technology allows you, if you want to make a new John Wayne movie, you can do it. You just get some actor that kind of looks like him, put his face on there.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. I mean, I don't have a problem with that. What I'm saying is changing, like, a story that's like, okay, you take something like, all right, like, you can't just be like, all right, well, next season of Cobra Kai, Mr. Miyagi comes back. Like, he's dead. Literally,
oh, man, I wasn't going to spoil it for you.
Like, literally, the actual actor is dead.
Zombie Miyagi? Sign me up.
You know, and you have, you know, in universe, he's dead. So it's kind of like...
Well, in universe, he's dead. But if he hadn't been dead, they could just find some dude that kind of has the same build as him. And
I'm fine with that, but that's not changing the story, though. That's what I'm saying. Like, if you're changing the story where, like, Miyagi was once dead and then now all of a sudden he's running around again, like, I got a problem with that. So, like, you give me Palpatine, it's like, okay, well, Palpatine's back, and then all of a sudden, in this movie, Palpatine's not here. It's like...
Well, I mean, I agree to the point of they might as well just make Duel of the Fates if they were going to.
That's
go
what I'm
that
saying.
far.
Like, if you're going to do it, just do a whole completely different movie.
But you never know. They might. I mean, again, now we started out the show by saying they probably aren't going to do it, that they're going to use TV to softly reboot everything. And 10 or 15 years from now, maybe they'll start to change some things. I mean, it's an interesting time.
And we're back to Duel of the Fates, ladies and gentlemen.
I know. We're fighting more now than we did then. That's usually the case, though. It's usually some stupid little thing.
Yep. Get to be in our bonnet, and we're...
Hey, gets viewers. Should probably actually, like, fight. Like, get heated conversations.
Yep.
We're, like, not speaking to each other 3 days, and we have to cool out, then we do it all over again. That'd be wonderful.
Like Stephen A. Smith and, not Stephen A. Smith, like Shannon Sharp and Skip Bayless. Come on, Eric.
Oh, that's great. But I just think that it's going to be, because I never thought they were going to release that cut.
Well, I mean, and that's
just because of a lot of the things you're talking about. It makes it, I mean, it's one thing to put additional scenes into something to give something more context. When you start sort of altering towards a different movie, it goes to what you're saying. Like, well, now which one's the real one?
Well, I mean, that's what I'm saying. I think you have to go with what was actually in the box office. Like, you have to go based upon, like, what was actually signed off on versus, like...
You mean what was first?
Yeah. I mean, because this is like, you know, like the Richard Donner version of Superman, right?
Yeah, the Superman 2 thing where they released that. But then again, you could flip that argument around though, because that was actually the original version that they changed. Same thing with the Zack Snyder thing. That was what he really wanted. Then, his dad got sick or whatever it was, and then he had to bail, and then they finished a movie he didn't really like. So now he's going back to make what he wanted to make in the first place. So really, from a certain point of view, there's that phrase again. This is really the original one.
And I could hang with that. If there's like an extenuating circumstance like that, like, okay, I get it. But other than that though, it's kind of like,
I know there's a slippery slope to it, because it's kind of like, okay, now are we just gonna, a couple of years later we decide we didn't like a movie and we're just gonna redo it?
Yeah, exactly. Like, and watch it be some classic movie or something like, all right, you know what? I don't like the '89 Batman. Let's just change it. And nah.
Yeah. Now, there's one thing about doing a remake versus actually going in and
right, because the remake is just like, okay, you got different people playing the roles, but the story's intact.
Right. It's almost like you never really, or very rarely, I can't think of anything offhand, but you never see a remake that has the exact same actors as the original.
Right. Dwight says retconning like that would definitely be a slippery slope, and I didn't like 8 or 9, so I won't protest about it.
Well, and that's where I think a lot of the fans are falling, actually, is the fact that, you had this situation where people were pretty dissatisfied with 8 and 9. Most people are given a pat. Like, people have a problem with the derivative nature of 7. Most people like 7. Everybody still had goodwill towards Disney Star Wars on 7.
So my whole thing is this then, like, okay, let's just say they redo 8 and 9. But, okay, what if you can't get the actors to come back?
Well, my problem is you definitely can't get Carrie Fisher to come back, and that's the whole. See,
well, I mean, not
I could
even
hang
that.
with it. Well,
but I'm even talking about like,
right,
Daisy Ridley,
sure, and Oscar Isaac. I mean, unless he needs a new house right now, he's not coming back. But I mean, let's just say you could get them back. The fact that had the original trilogy characters, it's almost like that's going to be the legitimate one, no matter what. You would actually have to remake that entire trilogy down the line, and nobody's even remaking Star Wars, much less movies that just came out. Now, granted, Star Wars is revered, and these movies nobody likes them. I mean, and this goes to Dwight's point. I bet you if they announced tomorrow they were remaking The Last Jedi, you'd have 80% of the fan base being all behind it.
Only way I can see them doing that is if they didn't touch Carrie Fisher's parts.
Well, what I think they would have to do, like, here's my thing. If you're going to remake it, first of all, if you're going to remake those, remake the whole trilogy and do it almost like the Timothy Zahn trilogy. De-age characters and make Han, Luke, and Leia a little bit, like, have it take place, like, probably not too long after The Mandalorian or something. Because if you're going to remake it, you might as well do something vastly different. Because you're right, the only way that you can get around the Carrie Fisher thing, first of all, if you remake Episode 8, and this is where, again, it becomes a semantical issue, because on one hand, since people didn't really have the biggest problem with 7, you could then take it into, this is what 8 and 9 should have been in this trilogy. Or you could just go, you know what? Let's just tell a different trilogy. And if you're going to do that, the best thing to do, as crazy as it sounds, is make Lucas's 7, 8, and 9. Because they had nothing to do with the original characters. Well, they kind of did, but they didn't. Luke trained Kira, who they ended up, like, using that name for
Solo.
Emilia Clarke's character in Solo. They spelled it differently, but it's pronounced the same.
All right. But see, my thing is, if you're going to, like I said, if you're going to redo 8 and 9, the only thing is you can't, like, okay, Carrie Fisher, you have to leave her alone. you have to leave whatever scenes because one, I mean, you're dealing with the original trilogy characters, and then two, it's kind of like, well, you're tampering kind of with her legacy.
Yeah.
So it's
That's
kind of
true.
like,
That's true. You are nullifying her last.
Yeah. So I mean, you have to. That's what I'm saying. Like you kind of have to just either just let it ride and just realize you just take the L and just realize we screwed up, or if you're going to do it again, you really have to pay very close attention. This is like if you're going to redo 8 and 9, you better have Favreau and Filoni doing it.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's.
I don't think fans would take it any other way.
No, that's a given. And here's what I would do. Here's how they could get around it. You could sort of redo it if you made movies that took place in between each one of them and had them slightly tweak things a little bit to where it lessened the impact. Because if you had, say, you had the trilogy, but let's just say you put a bunch of movies in between 7 and 8 and 8 and 9, and now suddenly instead of 3 movies, it's like 6. It somewhat lessens the impact of 7, 8, and 9. Now, granted, you would have some problems because what do you call them? But I mean, they're just standalone films.
The other thing though is like, you brought up the whole de-aging thing. And I'm like, see, once again, I as much as happy as I was to see, Mark Hamill in Mandalorian, like the look of it was perfect. But they still haven't fixed the mouth part yet.
But you're forgetting something. That was a TV budget.
I get it.
And this shows you how much they've come, how far they've come. Mm-hmm. The fact that they could barely do it in a movie, and now they could do it in a TV. And the TV version is having the same issue that the movie version had like 4 or 5 years ago. And you got to remember the de-aging thing. Look at what they did with Michael Douglas and Ant-Man.
Oh yeah, I get, like I said,
and Wasp. I
mean,
mean,
that's what I'm saying. I think it depends on who's doing it because I think it's hit and miss. Because you in the same thing when you had like, okay, you had Rogue One when you had it with Tarkin,
but that was made 4 years ago.
And no, but I'm just saying like Rogue, it's still the same thing, same movie though. Rogue One, you had Tarkin. His mouth didn't match well.
Right, but I'm just saying that technology was brand new when they did that.
But what I'm saying is Leia in that same movie was better.
Because Leia had one line. One line. She just said hope. She didn't say a whole sentence. She didn't say like a gazillion things. She just said one word.
That's true.
So that's what I'm saying. Like the de-aging thing has actually jumped forward by leaps and bounds. Like every year they've been able to do stuff with it. And now on the Marvel side of it, they've been using it liberally. Look at what they did with Samuel L. Jackson in Captain Marvel. That was insane. To the point where it wasn't even noticeable. That's what you can do when you're actually throwing a ton of money and now you have like... Mm-hmm. And now they're even able to do it in television. With a television budget. Mm-hmm. I mean, granted, The Mandalorian's a little bit more than most television shows. It's far less than any movie budget. So, from that standpoint, and especially as time goes on and it keeps getting perfected, I think that they could do it. The question is, do you really want to rely on that?
True. Ronaldo says, I don't want them to retcon the sequels.
Whoops. It's like I was just about to hit it and he commented something else. All right, go ahead.
I don't want them to retcon the sequels, but if they do, I hope it's similar to the way JJ did it with Star Trek.
Well, the funny thing about that was that's why we were all jumping up and down that he was doing Star Wars. Mm-hmm. Because he wasn't even a Star Trek fan.
Yeah, right, exactly.
In fact, he barely even saw any of them, and look at what he did with Star Trek. And he was a huge Star Wars fan, so we were all like, oh, man, can you imagine what this guy's going to do with Star Wars?
Right.
Now, to his credit, everybody did love 7.
Yeah.
And the problem is
they
that...
reasonably like 9. But
yeah, I mean, everybody... Exactly. They had some problems with 9, but everybody kind of understood, like, what's he going to do? I mean, he's following 8. I mean,
right.
There's only so much you can do.
Then he says, as for the original trilogy actors, the truth is I have no problem if they recast personally.
Well, he also says, and if they completely redo the sequels...
I would like to see the history of Skywalker's grandchildren, whether they are from the same legends or totally new characters.
Well, and again, that goes into the expanded universe thing. That's where I actually think that this is why I think that they should really start taking a second look at the expanded universe. Really, they should have done that all along. I mean, I get the fact that they wanted to do stuff, but they have to understand when they bought the franchise in 2012, at that time, the Thrawn trilogy was like 21 years old. Star Wars fans have been living with those storylines for a couple of decades. And that's really what they should have done. What they should have done was taken maybe that as a template and then... Now, granted, I know Lucas wasn't going to do that either. He had his own story to tell. But it just would have made more sense for them to maybe make some slight alterations to the expanded universe, which if you look, that's what they've been doing. I mean, they've been doing that with Thrawn. They brought Thrawn back in. Okay, they introduced him before the original trilogy, like kind of in between the prequels and the original trilogy, when originally he was more like where the Mandalorian is now, which is why it makes perfect sense for them. And I think that that's what they're doing. I think the reason why they brought up his name in the Mandalorian is they're going to be like, look, this is going to be more like the Thrawn that in the time period you remember. You know, but it'll be really interesting to see what they do because, as you pointed out, I mean, this Rogue Squadron thing is going to be the first movie that we see after, after 9. After 9. And it's going to be back how Rogue One was when it was like the very first standalone non-saga film ever. Rogue One is going to have that same kind of weight on it. Now, the interesting part is going to be...
Rogue Squadron?
What did I say?
Rogue One. You do the same thing I do sometimes. I get it.
Man,
I know. I do the same thing.
all the time. I know. I hate the fact that those things are...
yeah, because you got Rogue One and Rogue Squadron, so you...
Yeah, I mean, I actually, even on this little picture we got down, down there.
Yeah.
I almost put the Rogue One logo by mistake. I was so happy I didn't do it. That was insane. But what about you guys? What do you guys, you see where we're standing on all kinds of things when it comes to the filmmaking stuff. But as far as Rogue Squadron goes, I want to make sure I say that Rogue Squadron, not one squadron. Where do you guys think that the whole fate of Patty Jenkins stands? Do you think she's going to lose the movie? Do you think they're going to keep her on, but supervised visits, as it were? Where do you guys think that she stands now that Wonder Woman 1984 is not living up to either critic or fan expectations? Make sure you let us know in the comments section. Okay.
All right.
Our next thing is Pablo Hidalgo is kind of in trouble, which is really funny because he got into trouble with Star Wars Theory. Now, Star Wars Theory is a channel I actually watch. He's kind of similar in a way to what we do, except there's two of us and there's one of him, but it's really more like he just gets on camera and he talks about Star Wars. Now, granted, he'll use a lot of, like B-roll and stuff. He'll do some live streams, but a lot of stuff he does is pre-recorded too. But yeah, apparently, and this is what was funny. I ran across this video. I didn't watch it, but he put out a video that said Pablo Hidalgo made me cry or something like that, or laughed at me for crying or whatever.
Right.
And at first I just thought it was another, okay.
Thing.
Well, I didn't think it was fake because Star Wars Theory is a very legitimate guy. He was the one actually that made the Vader fan film that Lucasfilm made him take down, and he had to fight to get it put back up, and they finally relented, and it was a long battle. But essentially, I just passed it by because I thought it was another one of those maybe, and it was. I mean, he did tweet and all that, but I didn't think it was going to blow up like this. And then all of a sudden, I started seeing all these stories about, now Pablo's like, he had to apologize, but he still made it like part of his banner or something. And apparently, the way that Pablo did it was way worse than what I thought it was. And basically, he made fun of him for crying during Luke's return, which, of course, the video that you sent me, I mean, there was a lot of people that were reacting quite emotionally about it. And I mean, I myself, to be honest, teared up. Now, granted, I didn't have tears about Luke's thing. Where I started crying,
The whole Baby Yoda thing.
yeah, it was
Grogu.
when Din was holding Grogu
Yeah.
and kind of saying goodbye. And I mean, I teared up, man. I was crying, literally crying during that scene because it was just so touching to me, and I didn't expect it. Sometimes when an emotional scene hits and I'm not expecting it, that's when, it'll just hit me. I cried when Darth Vader died.
Mhm.
Here I was, a little 12-year-old kid, like, wiping away like real tears when Darth Vader was dying, because it's like, he can't die, man. He's Darth Vader. Plus, I wanted to see him good. It was sort of like we got a little bit of that with Ben Solo.
Mhm.
It was so satisfying to me, and I didn't think it would, because you remember, I didn't want Kylo to be redeemed, but when he was, I was just so moved by it. Like, man, I really like this guy as a good guy. And that's where this was coming for me. I mean, I just thought that, this was sort of, and I didn't read all the particulars. I'm sure you got a lot of that stuff, but I just thought, what is wrong with these people at Lucasfilm? They create something, fans respond positively to it, and then they make fun of them. Even Gina Carano came out today in defense of the whole situation. Mark Hamill kind of softly did it. And I don't think Pedro Pascal said anything about it, but it was just so funny that, like, it's just causing, like, such a big thing. I almost wish he would make fun of us. That way we could get in the news too. And so what do you got?
Okay. So, Pablo Hidalgo.
And this is a guy that I've conversed with on Twitter before. And he's always been actually reasonably cool writing back to me about stuff.
Well, let's see. On December 17th, a popular Star Wars YouTuber joined roughly 30,000 fans as he live streamed his reaction to the season 2 finale of The Mandalorian. The YouTuber, who most often goes by the name of his account, Star Wars Theory, and has also been referred to as Twos in some press reports, watched mostly in concentrated silence during the first 30 minutes of the episode. But when a telltale X-Wing fighter cruised into view, he jumped into his seat as a childlike grin washed over his face. "Don't give me hope, bro," he said to no one in particular. Roughly a minute later, when he saw a cloaked hooded figure.
So we did. Separately, of course. That's exactly how I was like, no.
Nah. Right. So when he saw a cloaked hooded figure wielding a green lightsaber appear, Twos burst into tears. Certain of what the episode later confirmed, it was Luke Skywalker. For the next 15 minutes, Twos wept as the episode unfolded. When it was over, he seemed slightly embarrassed, but mostly dumbstruck all at the deep feelings that the episode invoked in him. "Thank you, Lucasfilm," he said, still wiping back tears. "This is what the little 6-year-old kid in me wanted to see." 10 days later, Twos had a different sentiment entirely for Lucasfilm, exposing once again that the delicate and precarious relationship between the studio and its most vocal fans, and at a moment where it seemed like Lucasfilm and Disney had put the worst Star Wars fan unrest behind them. Twos posted to Twitter that he noticed that Pablo Hidalgo, a top executive in Lucasfilm's story department, was commenting on a thread that was ridiculing Twos' emotional reaction to Luke's appearance on The Mandalorian. Because Hidalgo's account was private, however, Twos could not see what the exec was saying. So, let's see. No, I'm not crying.
Yeah, exactly. Be careful.
I know, right? But when he learned what Hidalgo had tweeted, "Emotions are not for sharing," Twos was outraged, interpreting Hidalgo's remarks as indeed piling on the mockery of his genuine emotions. By that point, Hidalgo had deleted the tweet, but rather inexplicably, he also put a screenshot of it as a banner over his account. Twos took it as more of trolling. "You're telling people it is not okay to have emotions about the work your company produces, and you're making fun of them for crying," he tweeted. "Not okay."
All right, well, we got a lot of chats here. So basically, Ronaldo says, "I can't believe how this has exploded. The first time I saw the tweet, I didn't think Pablo was making fun of Theory, but I didn't understand what Pablo was referring to." He says, "Then I saw the live stream in which Theory talks about the subject, and I came to understand that he was making fun of him and he had to apologize. Then Dwight basically says, Pablo was saying you shouldn't broadcast emotions, but clearly he didn't realize that it was not a reaction video, it was a live watch party, so his critique was way off base. And then Ronaldo, of course, finishes this up. But then I looked at the tweet that Pablo was replying to. A user was criticizing Theory, saying he faked his reaction. And now I think Pablo was actually defending him. Please don't cancel me. Yeah, this whole thing is kind of weird because you also have to understand that there was already a little bit of bad blood between Theory and
Pablo.
Lucasfilm in general,
yeah.
because of the whole Vader fan thing. Yeah, so I'm wondering how coincidental that is. And a lot of this stuff is blown out of proportion. Now, I will say that Pablo has had some kind of short-tempered responses to certain things. But, when you look at his job and the Star Wars fan base and how they've been, I mean, they've been chasing people off of, everybody's all victimizing the Star Wars fan base. But remember, these are the same people, not necessarily Theory, don't get me wrong. He's actually one of the cooler people. That's why I give this story a little bit more credence and everything else. But, I mean, Pablo can be kind of insensitive. I've seen that on a lot of his tweets. I've even seen him on my own tweets. Like, stuff that he's tweeted back at me has been kind of snarky. And I've let it go only because I'm like, well, all right, he probably deals with a bunch of people all the time. And look, Star Wars fans, as innocent as they try to play it, they're the same ones that chase Kelly Marie Tran off. They're the same ones sending death threats to Rian Johnson. They're the ones that are getting their panties in a bunch because of certain things that happen in a movie or something. So you have to weigh that. But at the same time, there's also a lot of Star Wars fans like us, like the people that watch our channel, thank goodness, like Star Wars Theory, who are legitimate fans who are spreading the gospel of Star Wars and really want to talk about this and genuinely feel something. I mean, everybody forgets that when people make movies or make TV or whatever it is, any kind of an art, the idea is that you want your audience to feel something or not feel something. There's, it kind of goes both ways, like play the silence, so to speak. Right? So Pablo can sometimes be very insensitive. So I'm thinking that. And Dwight's saying Pablo was not defending him. He thought it was funny as well. I mean, I get it. I mean, it's one of those things where sometimes when you see people doing stuff like that, you kind of want to make fun of them. And I don't know. I still haven't seen the video.
Well, here's the thing. When you're an executive, when you're representing a company, you just sometimes have to just stay off social media sometimes. Or just sometimes you just have to just log out. Because everybody does not get, your sense of humor. That's something that, okay, if you wanted to, you screenshot that and send it in an email amongst, everybody at Lucasfilm, people who know you. You see what I'm saying? Like, there's just certain things that because you just, no one, it's no different than like text messages. Like, everybody doesn't understand or can't see your intent in the message. So I don't know if you're just joking, you're just like, haha, I'm just playing with you, man. Or if you're really serious about, like, he almost did like a whole, fear does not exist in this dojo type,
Well, it kind of goes back to you and I when we worked at, the school district we did, and the board meetings were just so, like, we couldn't believe how stupid these people were acting, and they're actually adults, educated ones at that. Now, how many times do we say, wouldn't it be cool if we made like a commentary video and put it out on our channel?
Exactly.
Our school channel, not this one. But we didn't do that because of the position that we were in.
Exactly.
That, even though you could do this whole like little comedy thing, it might not be viewed as funny by the people that are
you're making fun of
and are also signing our checks.
Exactly.
So I mean, that's kind of one of those things that you have to balance. And that's the thing. See, if Pablo wants to get on there, I think it's great that you have people at the Lucasfilm Story Group that actually interact with the fans, answer their questions, do stuff like that. But like you said, they have to show some professionalism.
Yeah, you have to understand that, like, although even with Gina Serrano, like, she's been in hot water for saying stuff because she's like, well, this is my personal page, but you're still representing an organization that your face is attached to. That's current. Like, I could see, if this was like,
like if the last thing she had done was the Fast and Furious stuff, and
yeah, and it was just like, and you're talking about, something on that show or that, it's like, okay, well, but you're currently a star on The Mandalorian, so people are currently watching you and you're referencing things based upon that particular show. So
yeah, what you have to do, like what a lot of stars will do with Facebook. I'm not really sure how this will work with Twitter. I guess you could do it the same way, but you basically have the official page and the unofficial page. The unofficial page is like your family, friends, whatever. But on the official page, that's kind of like a brand.
Right.
And that's what a lot of these actors don't realize. Now, granted, it's not like anything she said was super and even Pedro Pascal came to her defense and all that, but it just goes to show you that, yeah, you have to be careful about what you're saying. And part of the trade-off of being this famous person and this basically like your name is a brand now, yes, you have some benefits from that, but the trade-offs are you can't have the personal life that you once had.
Right.
You no longer have the anonymity that you once had. That's what kills me about people that get famous. And don't get me wrong, I understand all the trappings and why it's not necessarily what a lot of people signed up for, but you spend all your time trying to get people to know who you are, and then you want anonymity all of a sudden. It's kind of like, okay, it's because you didn't know everything that was involved. And, usually when people say that, they want that level of fame where people know who they are, but they don't necessarily recognize them.
Right.
Like they're not super famous. But once you are on a prominent show like The Mandalorian, yeah, you're going to deal with fame and you're going to deal with a certain level of, hey, you have to keep certain things out of your social media. It's no different than in jobs. It's like it used to be that these guys would go off and start partying and all this stuff on the weekend. Well, guess what? You can't post that. If you work for some Fortune 500 company,
you're like the senior vice president.
Yeah, or something like that. You can't, basically like post videos of you snorting cocaine off of a stripper. There's just certain things that you can't do. That's one of the things that
you only frowned upon.
Yeah, and everybody's like, well, my page, no, that's not how this works. Another thing that kills me, I see this on Facebook a lot. Not so much on the other ones, but the Facebook one. This cracks me up. People will post all this stuff, all this drama that's happening in their lives. Somebody will comment on it, and they're like, well, why are you commenting on this is family business or whatever? I'm like, if it's family business, keep it off of a public page.
Right.
Yes, I realize that it's your page and you can post what you want, but if you're posting it publicly, guess what? People are going to comment on it.
Exactly.
You can't all of a sudden be like, well, I don't want you commenting on this. So it's just so stupid that people don't understand this they don't think about it because it's a new world we're basically living in. Ronaldo says, Pablo has been rude at times. I can actually, like I said, attest to that. He's been rude to me. And I agree with Daryl that people in high positions at Lucasfilm should stay away from social media. Yeah, for the record, I said that too. You can... but much like Han shot first, he basically said it first. And we must remember that most of us are good fans. Toxic fans are the ones who make the most noise. That's true too. And the other thing is that a lot of times it's the casual fans that they're not aware enough of all this stuff to even comment on it. The ones that are sending Rian Johnson death threats are not the casual fans.
No.
And in fact, the toxic fans are usually the more hardcore ones, and they give the rest of the hardcore fans a bad name.
Yeah.
Dwight says, I agree. It has happened before. The only difference is that Star Wars Theory has so many subscribers, many of which came to his defense. Yeah. I so want to be Star Wars Theory when I grow up. And then, of course, Dwight is agreeing with Ronaldo, which I thought I'd put that up there. In the spirit of unity that is our our show. Everybody on our show generally gets along. And what's really nice about it is that, and even when we get people that don't chat in a lot or whatever, like they'll just come in and out and we're like, oh, a new person chatting or whatever. The cool thing is everybody mainly stays respectful. I've noticed this even in the comment section.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody goes psycho, even if they disagree with anything that I'm posting. Like, oh, sometimes Jason or somebody else might maybe disagree with something I said or we said on the show. And they put that, and then, of course, I might go back and forth with them a little bit. It's a discussion, like what it's supposed to be.
Right.
And that's basically why we created this channel, was to discuss things with basically our community, which we're hoping to grow. So if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button. But yeah, that's the kind of thing that we want to do. We want to grow and pretty much expand our community. And I think that is what Pablo should be doing as a representative of Lucasfilm, is he should be doing things to nurture the fan base, to maybe dispel some of the things that aren't true, like some of the theories. And, sometimes, yeah, I get it. Everybody likes to, before the movie comes out and everybody's speculating like crazy. Yeah, I'm sure it's fun for him and the other guys to throw people off the track and, just do stuff for fun or whatever. But the point is, try not to take it to the level of where you're actually laughing at or personally insulting all this stuff. Ronaldo, I almost said Pablo. It would be a day if Pablo started commenting on our show.
He'd be rude about it.
He probably would, actually. Ronaldo says, we are the light side of the fandom, guys. Yeah, well, that's one of the things that I noticed that was really cool, is that we tend to attract the more sensible. But again, you get what you put out there.
All right. Cobra Kai.
It's still on my mind, man.
See what you did there.
I mean, Cobra Kai was so good this season, you guys. But, I mean, that's the thing. It's like we basically are the type of fans that we seem to attract. So that's pretty cool. But as far as Pablo goes, I don't know how this one's going to end. I mean, I don't.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to blow over once again. Like, I think.
Well, yeah, I don't think it's going to be a thing, but I mean, I do think that it's kind of an unfortunate. It's weird. I mean, it's kind of came out of nowhere. It's like there's enough Star Wars stuff happening.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just the fact that you're not used to getting, when you have top execs, and that's the thing. It's like your position. If you were just like a camera operator, no one would care. But like, you're one of the lead guys of, that's almost like a Filoni or Favreau or anyone else, or Kathleen Kennedy got on there and, start popping off at people. Like, you're the face of this company.
Funny thing is you look at the crap that Rian Johnson gets on a daily basis and look at how he handles it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I was going to bring that up, is that, for all the grief that he's caught, I'm surprised he hasn't run off social media. He's laughs and jokes about it and some of the stuff,
I'm honestly surprised he hasn't done some terrorist plot, to be honest. Like he's the guy that blows up the next Star Wars convention. Not that I'm giving any ideas out there, but
right, exactly.
I mean, it's kind of the next thing to the Nashville bomber or something, that he's going to go off and do something crazy because he's been so browbeaten on social media. That's got to do something to you. I mean, it takes a special kind of person to weather that and still have a good sense of humor about it.
Well, that's why most people just don't even get on it or read too much into it. They just keep pushing. Yeah,
I mean, you almost have to. Either that or do it for entertainment. But what about you guys? Do you guys think that Pablo, well, first of all, I don't know if anybody would agree that Pablo was actually acting in the best interest of Star Wars fans, but how big of a deal do you think this is? Do you think that this is something that should really be made too big of a deal out of, or do you think that this is something that maybe, shouldn't? Actually, I don't really know what to ask everybody about this.
I mean, just,
give us your thoughts.
Yeah, just give us your thoughts on the whole situation.
Put in the comment section your thoughts on this, and we'll entertain any one of them. All right, so the next topic here. Yes. This is really cool.
Yeah.
I like the fact that you put this on here. Because,
you would.
Yeah, this is one of those things that I really do think that they need to answer some questions about this, because when you look at the Book of Boba Fett, and that's what we're talking about, questions that the Book of Boba Fett, which is a new series that's going to come out next December, and we're not really sure. It's looking like it's a sequel to The Mandalorian, actually, or not, maybe not a sequel, but happening during that time period. There's some things that we have to look at as far as the series goes. And so that's what this whole topic is about. But I do want to catch this thing that Ronaldo says. John Campea recently said, referring to this, all the healing that Mandalorian did was undone in a single day. Unfortunately, I think he's right. Now, what Ronaldo is referring to in our last segment, if you guys are just watching this segment of the show, because I do break these things up, is that pretty much what's going on is that Pablo Hidalgo essentially laughed at Star Wars theory for the end of The Mandalorian Season 2.
I got to take a family call real quick, so
all right.
I'll be right back.
All right. I got you covered. So, essentially, while Daryl's basically doing his thing, I think one of the things that you have to look at, no matter what you do, when it comes to the Book of Boba Fett, is that you have to figure out, number one, how did he come into this kind of power? Because he obviously goes in, he shoots Bib Fortuna, and just like out of nowhere, he's taking over the throne. It's almost like he's taking over Jabba's palace. How on earth is that possible? I mean, is it really that much in a tattered remains or whatever that you have a few people in there and it would be that easy? Because the question you have to ask yourself is, why didn't he do that to begin with? Or if you want to go through the whole thing of, maybe he's in the position to, and, he needed his armor and all that, okay, I can hang with that. But the question is, why didn't anybody else take it over? Do you think that maybe it was because Boba Fett was the only one powerful enough? Because everybody certainly saw him as Jabba's right-hand man, and they gave him a lot of the due respect. But I think one of the first questions that has to be answered is, with the Book of Boba Fett here, how did he even come into this kind of prominence? It's one of those things that I think it's really interesting how this series just seemed to drop out of nowhere. Another question I think that they need to go into, and I'm sure when Daryl gets back, he'll agree with this as well. And let me know what you guys are thinking, chat in live, especially since I'm on my own here. The other question they need to answer is, how did he get out of the Sarlacc pit? I think that's a big one. That's a big one that if you're going to put this series out and you're going to make Boba Fett the focus, you have got to tell us, how did he get out of the Sarlacc pit? Without question. Because the Sarlacc pit was pretty much one of the central things that happened to this character in the saga. If you remember before, we didn't really know that much about him. We knew a little bit about Boba Fett, but we didn't know a whole lot about Boba Fett. But, so it was one of those things that, he comes in, and I see Daryl's back with us. That's good.
Yes.
I was just telling everybody that we need to, besides how did he take over Jabba's palace, we got to figure out how he got out of the Sarlacc pit.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Because, before basically Return of the Jedi, we knew that he was a bounty hunter that was favored by Vader. Mm-hmm. So that elevated his status. We knew a little bit about the holiday special. That whole little animated short or whatever. So we knew going in that Boba Fett was kind of powerful. But what we didn't know is he goes into the Sarlacc pit. He's supposedly there for good. Mm-hmm. How does he get out? Now, we know how he got out in the expanded universe.
All right.
But we never got a Disney canon version. So I think that the second question that they need to answer is, how did he get out of the Sarlacc pit?
Well, yeah, that's the number one question on everybody's mind is, how did he get out of the Sarlacc? And then, of course, does he hold Han and Luke responsible for being in the Sarlacc pit to begin with?
Well, the thing that's really interesting about the way that they do, the way they're doing this whole depiction of Boba Fett in The Mandalorian, is he's not like a bad guy, or at least he doesn't seem to be. In the original trilogy, he was definitely on the side of the Empire, and I mean, I get it now that we've humanized the Empire, we've done all that stuff, but Boba Fett was looked at as a bounty hunter. Even then, they weren't necessarily like terrible. It's just that they weren't really lawful, I guess would probably be the best way to put it.
Well, you had some bounty hunters who were, I mean, they're basically equivalent to what you would call like a bail bondsman.
Yep.
So
that's true. Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
so they have a rough job. The job is, okay, I have to track down people, and of course, when you're tracking down people, they're usually criminals, and people don't want to go quietly. Now, when you look at it from the standpoint, the Empire is essentially the government.
I was gonna make that. Yep.
So, if the government is putting like an APB out on, a particular person or a group of people or whatever the case may be, it's like, okay, well, it's no different than if the court of, Detroit or somebody said like, hey, we got this guy that's, skipping town or he's causing all this trouble. We need him to be brought in. Now, some bounty hunters follow the law. Others kind of.
I'm glad you added that.
Like,
I was gonna say,
Bosk is the type of guy who's not really going to.
Well, but even Boba Fett, though, man, he's part of a criminal empire with Jabba. I mean, it's not like he was exactly.
But see, once again, he's hired. See, and that's the thing about being a bounty hunter in this Star Wars world, is that you're just a person for hire, no different than Han was a smuggler.
Well, I will say this. You don't really see Boba Fett do anything crazily illegal or criminal.
No.
I mean, all he really does is go after Han. We hate him because he's going after Han, but to him, it's just like, okay, this is a smuggler who's wanted by the legitimate government of the time.
Yeah, and once again, he's still acting under the auspice of the government that hired him. So Jabba being, even though he's a crime lord, or a crime lord on Tatooine, he runs Tatooine.
Yeah, okay. I mean, it's kind of like
so he's still that's
sort of like legitimate, but
it's
not.
It's kind
really.
of like the government of, because they don't fall under the jurisdiction of the Empire because they're in the Outer Rim.
Yeah, they're in the Outer Rim, but it makes me wonder how legitimate he is. Like, is he is there a puppet government or something, or how do the Tatooine citizens look at it?
Look at what?
Well,
Jabba?
I mean, because we know that Jabba essentially controls it.
Right.
Much the same way the mob controlled Chicago, but they weren't the legitimate government of Chicago. They just controlled it.
Well, I mean, but the thing is that we learned from in Mandalorian, when Cobb Vanth was talking about, like, okay, as soon as the Death Star blew up, these new people tried to come in and take over.
Yeah, criminals, pirates.
Right.
Well, I mean, that's not.
But that's
not really a government, though. I mean, it's.
But what I'm saying, because there was no.
I see. It's almost like the absence of a government.
It's like whoever decides to step up and who has the ability to take care of the people.
I don't know, man. I mean, I could see that.
They become the government.
I could see that happening in like a town or an area, like what happened in the case of.
Like you said, like the Chicago thing is, yeah, like they're the kind of. They weren't the government, but the mob ran a lot of different things, and including government officials.
Right.
But the thing is that there is no government on Tatooine. In the Outer Rim, there's no one that controlled them. That was the whole thing. And that even in Mandalorian, they said they've been trying to, Grief Karga said it. It's like they've been trying to control the Outer Rim. When would they learn they can't control the Outer? They've been trying to do this since basically the days of the Empire. If the Empire couldn't do it, what makes these people think that they can control the Outer Rim? You can't.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I'm going to have to delve into that a little bit. Like which is to say I'll go on StarWars.com and see. So Ronaldo says, let me get this here. I think we'll see how Space Gangster and the Hutts react to how Boba came to power. I hope so, because they kind of have to. He also says, in my opinion, I don't think it's necessary to explain how he got out of the Sarlacc pit, but I do think it is necessary to explain why he did not recover his armor from Cobb Vanth earlier. There is actually an in-new canon story on that, the Aftermath trilogy, that talks about how essentially Cobb Vanth got it from some Jawas. So one of two things happened, because he certainly went into the Sarlacc with his armor.
Mm-hmm.
So either the Sarlacc kind of yacked up his outfit, or maybe when he got out or something. I mean, so from that standpoint, I can see what Ronaldo is saying. It's kind of like, well, we have to sort of figure out, how did Boba Fett get separated from his armor?
Well, yeah, I mean, but I think in order to do that, you have to explain how he got out of the Sarlacc pit.
Well, I mean, I think that I understand what Ronaldo's saying in the sense of, if you just say he got out of it, then he just got out of it. I mean, not everything needs to be explained. Sarlacc pit, on the other hand, I kind of think that needs to be explained.
Definitely. I mean, when you have a creature that, one, will slowly digest you over the course of 10,000 years, and then when you look at how the thing is structured, how do you get out of something like that? Especially, you got stomach acids and all this kind of stuff. I mean,
I just think they need to go with the explanation of the expanded universe on that one.
Mm-hmm.
That would actually be my suggestion, but I don't know. I don't know. But that's two. So I mean, first we got to figure out how, because when you were gone, one of the things that I put forth was when he took over and shot up Bib Fortuna, and it's kind of like, okay,
he was definitely put on some pounds.
Yeah. Which is interesting. It's the same actor who actually played him in The Phantom Menace.
Mm-hmm.
But why didn't anybody do that to begin with? I mean, it didn't seem like it was all that difficult to take out the few people that were even in there. And why did Boba Fett wait till now? Which, of course, I'm sure has something to do with him getting his armor back, and, it's probably all part of his master plan. But what I'm saying is they got to actually talk about that. I mean, you can't just show a post-credit scene where he takes over Jabba's palace, and we're like, okay, how did that come up?
Yeah.
And what's his grand plan?
Well, that's the other question. They said, what will Boba Fett do now that he's in charge of Tatooine's underworld?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. Because that's, obviously there's a grand plan there. There's some sort of a master plan. There's something, because you could tell how methodical he was. Now, granted, he took a little bit of a detour from that to help Din.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's like, okay, first I got to get my armor. Then I got to go shoot up Jabba's palace and take over. There's something going on.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. He definitely has a plan. But it's just, but see, I think what he's going to try to do, at least my speculation, because I think they kind of hinted towards it a little bit when Din and Boba walked into that cantina and they were talking about Mandalore. And he's like, well, why would you want to go back there? That's, the place is like glass. They let that Empire kind of just ransack that place. But at Tatooine, he probably feels like, okay, I can set up my own new clan of bounty hunters or Mandalorian or whatever he wants.
Well, I wonder if Bo-Katan's going to figure into this at all, because, one of the things that came a little bit from the expanded universe, but definitely is carried over. Well, I mean, in particular, the Clone Wars, a little bit, at least for Jango, and maybe a little bit Boba, is how the Mandalorians don't like the Fetts and think that they're just pretenders. Even though the Mandalorian did sort of retcon a little bit Boba Fett once again.
Yeah.
Like, oh, no, look, Jango and Boba are now actually Mandalorians. It's like, okay. First, Boba Fett was a guy named Jaster Muriel or whatever, and he was a Mandalorian or whatever. And then it's kind of like George said, nope, he's actually an unaltered clone of Jango and kind of like his son. And they were basically, they're wearing the Mandalorian armor, but they're not really Mandalorians. And then now in the Mandalorian, we get, oh, just kidding. Now they're actually Mandalorians.
Yeah, I think, he has some, honestly, I think it's going to end up coming down between Bo-Katan and Boba. I think they're going to basically kind of fight for the name of some things. And I think Bo-Katan is going to kind of start her whole thing on Mandalore if she can get the Darksaber back from Din. And I think that, Boba's going to kind of try to do his own thing.
Yeah, but do you think that we're getting this mini-series. So it's like a two-part question. I won't name off everything, but it's kind of, so I'll keep it at a two-part. Number one, do you think Boba's going to show up on The Mandalorian again?
Yes.
Okay. And then two, do you think he's going to show up on any of the other series?
Yes.
All right, Jessup. Let me just get to Ronaldo's comment really quick because it kind of factors into what we're talking about. It would also be good to explain if the New Republic will do something about Boba, Ronaldo says. I don't think they will let him operate easily.
No, and that's why I believe he's going to play a part, I think, on the Rangers show.
Yeah, the Rangers is probably the show, other than The Mandalorian, that I could see him being on.
Definitely, because it's dealing with the law, it's dealing with, the New Republic trying to kind of seize control of things and kind of establish order. I think it's going to put Cara Dune in a vicarious situation because she's done stuff with Boba, so she likes him. But if the New Republic, which is basically her new boss now, is basically telling her like, well, we need you to hunt, so it's going to be a conflict of interest.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I think that definitely we're going to start seeing things like that. And also, another thing that I think we're going to see, he may show up, and it's kind of unlikely. There's an off chance he could show up in Ahsoka.
Boba?
Yeah. I only say that because Ahsoka's going to take place in the same time period.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that Bo-Katan is actually going to play a little bit of a role in there.
Oh, yeah. I believe so, too.
But what's going to be interesting, though, is that even though Thrawn was mentioned in The Mandalorian, I'm not sure if he's actually going to be in The Mandalorian or if that was kind of the introduction to
that character.
Yeah, because Ahsoka is after him.
Mm-hmm.
Probably for Ezra and for maybe a host of other reasons. So maybe that was a way to introduce the character and say, hey, Thrawn's coming in live action, but this is more for Ahsoka's story. Because obviously Thrawn, you could say that maybe he was pulling Gideon strings, but we don't know that. Now, if Bo-Katan shows up in Ahsoka, there's an off chance that maybe Boba will fall into that as well. And I only say that because there's more to that story. I mean, when you see, like you said, when you see that scene between Boba Fett and Bo-Katan and her other little minions, there's something there. Yeah. There's a backstory there.
Definitely.
And I do wonder if that's going to show up in the Boba Fett series too. And now, I'm trying to remember, did they actually say how long that series was going to be? Like how many episodes?
No, they haven't given really much information, but I think it's going to be a limited run though.
Yeah, well, the thing is it going to be like, because they kind of called it a mini-series, so are we talking like 4 or 5 episodes? Are we doing a full-blown season, which would be 8? So it's just a one and done? Ronaldo says, it's strange to see everything that is going to happen with these interconnected series and how they were probably ignored in the sequels.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's the other dangerous timeline, and this is why I say that I could see Lucasfilm eventually softly rebooting the sequel trilogy, because one of the dangers of coming up with all this stuff that happens before, if they keep it early enough, they can get away with it. But the problem is that they start getting a little too close to The Force Awakens, their absence is going to be conspicuous. I mean, you're already having this problem by having all these Jedi surviving, because everybody's like, well, where was Ahsoka during, the original trilogy? The other thing is Mace Windu. People are thinking Mace Windu is going to pop up, especially because on his birthday, last week.
Oh, Samuel L. Jackson's birthday, yeah.
StarWars.com, or the actual Star Wars official site, basically wished him a happy birthday and said that
the story's not over yet.
Yeah, the story's not over yet.
Or it's just begun.
Or it's just begun, yeah. And they posted it, they showed him as Mace Windu, and it's like you gotta wonder what's up with that. I mean, most of the time you could dismiss it, but it's like they know how the fans are. You don't really want to go playing with the fans like that, especially when they're already theorizing these things.
Yeah.
So it would not surprise me if Mace shows up in Ahsoka. And it goes to Ronaldo's point where it's kind of like, you know what? Where all these series are interconnected, it's going to be interesting to see how they're connected to each other. Now, there's some like the Acolyte and stuff like that where you're not going to get much crossover.
All right.
But I could see The Mandalorian being kind of the flagship show.
Yeah, the hub.
The hub, perfect term. It's the hub, and then you have all these other shows that are sort of
plugging into
it. Kind of like surrounding the
coming out of it,
nucleus.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and you could draw a chart to it, and it really makes me wonder what they're going to do. Just like the whole Luke Skywalker series that we started talking about with this show. You know, it's going to be interesting. So what about you guys? What are you thinking as far as the Book of Boba Fett? Do you think that the questions that we put forth are pretty much it? Those are the definitive answers? Or are there additional answers that you guys think that need to be put forth in this series? Or another option, do you actually think a different set of answers need to be answered? How many times can I say that? It's almost like a drinking game. Let us know in the comment section what you guys are thinking. All right. It is time.
It is time
for one of my favorite segments.
One of his favorite
So
segments.
you ready to you ready to read this stuff off?
I sure am.
All right, let's do it. It's a segment we call Clear Your Mind. That's right. It's time to erase all the drama and everything from earlier in the show, which there actually was some this time.
Pushing it back into 2020.
Yep, push it back into 2020. This is the magical 2021 now. I mean, I'm getting a little bit Pablo-like on this. Remind me to tell you guys about the funny Pablo story with Daryl. The Rio Raps.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man.
As Maz would say, it's a story for another time.
It is.
But this is where we actually read off your questions. You guys submit questions. We pick 2 of them to answer on each of our shows. Who's first and what do they want?
The first question comes from Waylon Ferguson. And the question is, why did Bo-Katan act so surprised to see a Jedi? Why didn't she think it was Ahsoka coming to rescue them?
Yeah. Talking about the end of Mandalorian.
Yeah. That's a good question, though.
It is, because number one, remember, she's the one that sent Din to Ahsoka.
Exactly.
It's like, oh, we'll go talk to Ahsoka.
Yep. So, especially when she's like a Jedi, like how does she know?
The only reason why I could see her being surprised, it's not so much that she was surprised it was a Jedi as much as she was surprised at who it was. Because we don't really know that Bo-Katan knows who Luke Skywalker is. In fact, probably doesn't. I mean, unless Ahsoka maybe mentioned him, one of them.
Well, I mean, the whole point of Din was to try to find, more Jedi. And so she could have been like, oh, okay, well, maybe Ahsoka pointed him to another Jedi or something like that that's coming to rescue. But maybe she didn't see the...
Maybe she's an early riser.
She didn't see what do you call
Sorry, guys. Throwing a few good men lines in here.
Crap. I always keep forgetting the tails that they have.
We're so good at this.
Like Leku.
Leku, yeah.
Leku. So maybe she didn't see those and didn't think it was Ahsoka.
Well, the other thing, too, she would have... I mean, if she knows anything about Ahsoka, she knows that should be a white lightsaber, and it was green.
But they were looking at a black and white screen, though.
Oh, yeah. I guess so. Yeah, but there wasn't any kind of there's still like a colored hue to that thing, and it, it shouldn't have been. I mean, it was interesting because, first of all, they probably didn't expect it because, number one, why would Bo-Katan expect it, if you think about it? Because the only reason why Luke came was because Grogu called him.
Well, yeah, but I mean, they were last seen with... she sent, Din and Grogu to Ahsoka. Mm-hmm. So it's like, okay, well, maybe, she showed up. Now, the only thing I can understand, maybe why she didn't know was because he showed up in the X-Wing.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, that's probably the answer. Because if you think about Bo-Katan's character, too, man, she's seen everything. I mean, at this point, nothing should surprise her at all. But yet she was kind of shocked. And that's the only thing I can think of is that.
Because that's the first thing that she noticed. Like, okay, it's like, well, there's an X-wing showing up. Then she sees like it's a New Republic, but then she's like, okay, the X-wing wouldn't identify itself. And then next thing you know, you see like a Jedi walking around. You're like, well, when did the New Republic get a Jedi? So she's probably confused.
It's probably like, you know what? Nobody tells me anything around here. So when did the New Republic get a Jedi?
Huh?
And the thing too is that if she knew that was Anakin's kid.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that would just be mind-blowing to her, I'm sure.
Definitely.
I mean, when you really stop and think about when you bring Bo-Katan, this is what I love about this whole thing. You're starting to bring all these like Clone Wars era cartoon characters into this world.
That's one of my big questions. I'm really curious to see if they address either in season 3 of The Mandalorian or maybe on some other show, is that because Luke never identified himself.
Yeah, that's true.
So Bo-Katan's got to wonder who the heck that is. Like, okay, Ahsoka I know, but who the heck are you? That's got to, especially because, the Jedi and the whole Mandalorian war. So, she's got to wonder like, okay, well, the heck do you come from? And especially if she hears the name Skywalker, that's going to tip her off to like Anakin Skywalker.
Well, that's another thing too. It's like, think about it though. If Bo-Katan were running around the whole galaxy like it appears she has been, surely she's heard of the Skywalker that blew up the first Death Star. I mean, it's like he was famous all over the place. I mean, granted, nobody knew he was a Jedi. Of course, she probably, if she knows, wait, Anakin's kid? Yeah, he's a Jedi. Or he's Force sensitive or whatever. I mean,
he's got something.
So, I mean, this is why I'm saying that it's really interesting how they're putting all this lore and all this stuff crammed in around the original trilogy and prequels. It's like you have to be somewhat vague about this stuff, because if you start getting into the minutia of stuff, it's going to start to not make sense. Like, well, I mean, because the way that it's starting to look, you have all these allies that the New Republic could have called on, or I mean the rebels. You have more and more Jedi are coming out of the woodwork. It's like, I'm sure eventually Luke's going to be like, you know what? You all need to, where were you? Especially because you all knew him.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, Ahsoka, you were my father's apprentice. Could have probably used your help when I was fighting those guys.
Right.
Especially because she knew Palpatine. I mean, she knew all these people.
Yep.
Okay, so Ronaldo, I'm done ranting. Ronaldo says perhaps she thought that the Jedi were totally extinct and believed that the only one was Ahsoka. Well, that's a possibility.
True.
Again, though, I'm sure she's heard of Luke Skywalker from the Death Star thing, if nothing else. So that had to get her at least wondering. And then again, she wouldn't necessarily make the jump that he was a Jedi, just that maybe he was related. Because, I mean, it's not like you know how old. I mean, it depends. But again, that's kind of, it's not really a rant, but it's kind of like if you go back, it's sort of like the more holes and stuff you try to fill in, you almost create more.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to get to the point where they're going to have to rely on the world between worlds to explain any of this stuff.
That's what I've been saying the whole time.
I know you've been flying the flag of that forever, and one of these days, what's going to happen is they're going to put that in a movie or one of these series, and you're going to be like, kind of like me with Rosario Dawson being Ahsoka.
Mm-hmm.
Vindication, my friend, vindication. Who's next, and what do they want?
We have Heather Newman. Do you think it's wise for Disney to release Book of Fett at the same time as Mandalorian next year?
Oh, I can almost do a Seinfeld thing. Hello, Newman. I'm sorry, read that again. I was involved in my joke.
Do you think it's wise for Disney to release Book of Fett at the same time as The Mandalorian next year?
A lot of that depends on what's in the Book of Fett. And it also depends on what's in The Mandalorian. I mean, I'm not trying to be, unnecessarily, I'm not trying to Pablo out on you or anything like that, but.
Well, I mean, I understand what they're saying is because it might cause some confusion to people because you have two of the same kind of characters at
just a little. I think it's really interesting that they're releasing it in December. First of all, I don't understand why they insist on torturing us like this.
Right.
Number one, it's hard enough to wait till October. Now you're putting it out in December.
I know.
Now, granted, the COVID thing may be affecting that. So I'll give them a little. This year, I'll give them a pass. But moving forward, it's like, guys.
Yeah, spread this out.
The second thing is, you and I have been speculating forever that a Boba Fett standalone show, and this is before we even saw the end credit scene, like we didn't even know, it didn't have a name or anything like that. We just knew that there were rumors. I don't even think it was confirmed yet. And if it wasn't confirmed, it was before it was confirmed, but even after it was, basically they said, okay, we're definitely doing this, but we didn't have a title or anything like that. Pretty much what was going on was we said, release it in the spring. So that way you're keeping a little bit of Star Wars out there for people, right?
Because we got the Bad Batch coming up at the end of this month.
Yeah.
Then maybe that probably is going to run to maybe March, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it could. Well, it depends. I mean, if they do a full-blown 22 episodes, it'll run through like half the year.
Well, yeah.
But even still, that's animated. I mean, if you give people, because there's some people that are not going to follow the animated shows.
Sure.
I mean, granted, the Clone Wars thing is bumped up because everybody's like, who are all these people? And everybody's like, wait a minute, they're in this Clone Wars? Like, there's like 50 characters from the Clone Wars in this season alone. So maybe I ought to watch that, kind of like what your grandfather did.
Yep.
Where it's like, maybe I ought to take a second look at this. But that notwithstanding, there are some people that are going to put their foot down and say, listen, I'm only watching
live action
stuff. Keep the live. You have a live action in December, put it out in May, then another one in maybe October or November, December. What I thought was going to happen was if they announced The Mandalorian 3 in December, meaning season 3, then I thought, oh, well, maybe that's because Book of Boba Fett will take its old October slot. Although last year, I think season 1 was done in November. And then this time it was like the end of October. So they've been playing with the release dates for a while. But I honestly think that offhand, I would say it's a mistake. But being that I trust Favreau and Filoni so implicitly, even though it may not be their decision, it might be like a Lucasfilm thing. There must be something about the storyline. That's what I can't get away from. There's got to be something about the storyline that's like, you know what?
Yeah, connective tissue.
There's got to be. Like maybe the Book of Boba Fett is like a bridge between season 2 and season 3. And so what they're doing is they're using the Book of Boba Fett as almost a previously on The Mandalorian, right? And it'll sort of bridge the two together.
It is a miniseries, so you could, that's a very good idea.
I mean, now how many is it? Because, I mean, December only has, 4 weeks? Maybe there might be a 5th in there, but if they keep putting it out on Fridays or whatever, I'm assuming there's only 4, so it's kind of like, is it a 2-episode thing? I mean, exactly how many is this miniseries?
Dwight says Bo-Katan has fought with Ahsoka, so she knew it wasn't her. That's back to the original question, the first question.
Yeah. Okay.
On this one, I think Ronaldo says I think the Book of Boba Fett will come out the first of this year, and Mandalorian season 3 will come out in 2022.
And he also says it's horrible having to wait so long. I know.
Yeah.
That's the way. I mean, but honestly, I feel that way about everything that I watch if I'm really into it.
Yeah, like Top Gun's been postponed. The James
Yeah,
Bond
I mean, the
movie's
Top Gun thing has just been cruel beyond words because, I've been waiting for that. But even these TV shows, it's like season 2 of Cobra Kai comes out. Well, actually, season 1 comes out. We find out, oh, man, the show's amazing. Oh, it's going to be a whole year before season 2. It's like,
Right.
Then, of course, when 2 came out, I had no idea it was going to be a year and a half. And now that I've watched 3, it's like, I'm like shaking. I want the next thing. And I felt the same way about The Mandalorian. At the end of season 1, when Gideon's holding that darksaber, I thought I was going to explode until I saw season 2. And now I feel that way about season 3.
Dwight says, I heard season 3 of Mandalorian was coming out early 2022.
And that would make sense. That would make sense.
Back. Okay.
And that would definitely make sense because I can't see how you could put out both of them in December. But
That's originally how it was, but then I guess
yeah, maybe that's what it was. Is that season 3 was gonna, and then they came out with the Book of Boba Fett thing, and it's like, okay, that's gonna be out. What's really gonna be interesting to me though is how they're gonna handle it once they have all these series in production.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, the first seasons have been released. It's like, okay, you've got, Rangers of the Republic. You got Ahsoka. You got Lando. You got the Acolyte. You've got, I mean, obviously Mandalorian still.
Possible new Luke Skywalker.
Maybe a new Luke Skywalker. You got Obi-Wan. You got Cassian Andor. You got all these series that are coming out. How are you going to balance out, okay, season 1 of this show ends because the last thing, now granted, they're not necessarily going to be competing because even though they're all going to be released on a specific day, it's not like, okay, every Friday at 8, and that's your only opportunity. I mean,
right.
Once it's released, you can watch it whenever you want. But it seems like if they overlap too much, it's going to take away. Now, the flip side of that is that, okay, but if we only release one series at a time, if you're not into that series, you're not watching anything.
Mm-hmm.
If we give you like 3 or 4 different types of series, okay, this one's not for me, but this one is. Point is, no matter what month it is, I'm still watching some Star Wars content.
True.
Ronaldo.
Yes, he says, I understand your pain. I've been waiting for Avatar 2 for years.
Oh, yeah. Don't even get me started on Avatar. That's another one. But that one, it's been so long.
All right.
Like, my itching to see it is diminished so much. Now, granted, if I were to go back and watch it again, because it has admittedly been a little bit since I've seen it.
Or if you just saw a trailer for the second one.
Or if I just saw a trailer for the second one, I'd be like, oh, I can't wait till this thing's out. I mean, I originally felt that way about Wonder Woman, too. Ronaldo also says, I have no doubt that Kevin Feige is working on these series in some way. Maybe. Wasn't he still... There was a whole thing where he was supposed to do a movie, and then Taika Waititi's still supposed to do something, and...
Technically, Benioff and Weiss are still kind of supposed to come back and do something, too.
What? I haven't heard that.
Yeah.
Now they're coming back? Well, the only reason why they left, though, was... I thought they left because of creative differences.
Yeah, but I heard they were supposed to, like, come back and do something else in this whole little world. But they haven't named it. But they're still around. Probably something Old Republic or High Republic.
And then, of course, don't forget, there is the Rian Johnson trilogy. To my knowledge, that has not been canceled.
Yeah, it's not been.
So we might be subjected to not one, but multiple Rian Johnson. But you know what? If it takes place outside of this known thing, I'm all for it.
You know what they're probably going to do for his? They're probably going to adapt. You remember that episode of Clone Wars where I'm trying to think. It's like, it was that. That's what it was. It was that assassination of that one Rhodian, that senator.
Oh, yeah.
And they had to led that whole investigation.
Mm-hmm.
That little guy kept going around trying to find out who did it. Knives Out 2.
Oh, yeah. There's already going to be a Knives Out 2. So they want to make a whole series based on Daniel Craig's detective from that.
Yeah.
But it's true, though. They could do something like that. Or he could do an underworld thing. Which would be really cool. I mean, there's so many different directions you can go. I mean, the High Republic, don't forget about that.
Yep, that's still out there. That's why I said Benioff and Weiss could do that.
They could do that. I mean, if they decide they don't want to go the Old Republic route, they can go the High Republic route. I mean, there's all kinds of things that they could do.
I've got the High Republic.
But, I mean, the other thing, too, is, there's the unknown regions. Just like with Rogue Squadron. It actually surprised me. Like, I know we said it during the show, but it really clicked. I forgot it was taking place after Rise of Skywalker.
Mm-hmm.
So technically, Rogue Squadron is actually going to be like a sequel to the
Saga films.
Yeah. Now, I should have brought this up back on the Patty Jenkins story that we were talking about, but, you could look at it like she can't really mess it up too bad because it's not...
It's not a world. It's not a universe that's been...
Because if you put it after... Now, granted, you could still maybe have Wedge be the leader of it because he was kind of around and Rise of Skywalker, but still, I mean, I don't think they're going to do that. They said completely new characters, I think. So
And you also have to answer, well, where is Rey and Finn?
yeah,
And Poe.
right.
Because if that's a Rogue Squadron, you got to have Poe.
Well, Poe is Black Squadron.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you got to think.
I know, it's like,
I mean, come
but
on.
you could get away. You can almost do it. You can almost Luke Skywalker him. Maybe mention his name. Because, Rogue Squadron isn't necessarily flying the same missions as Black Squadron.
Mhm.
So you could skirt around it, but it's just interesting to me that they're having it take place then, because Rogue Squadron is so rooted
Yeah.
in the post Return of the Jedi thing. Because a little bit in the original trilogy as well, but that's where it kind of got its start. But
Right.
it really came to prominence, and honestly, it's an expanded universe invention. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, it might even be a Timothy Zahn invention. But I don't remember. But I think that's going to do it for our show today. And if it's like usual, I'm sure there's going to be like 3 chats that come in as I'm closing it out.
Yeah, Ronaldo has one last one that says,
Oh, does he? Oh,
You think Zack Snyder would fit in Star Wars?
see, it never fails.
Um,
Oh, that's
I don't
I don't
think
know.
so.
No.
I'm not feeling that one.
Let's put a moratorium on Bryan Singer,
Yes.
Shane Black.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of now. Rennie Harlan, I wouldn't mind seeing doing a Star Wars project.
He's Ronaldo said I want him to direct the Darth Bane movie. Talking about Zack Snyder.
Well, that could be interesting. And the Darth Bane thing's been on the table. Like Dave Bautista is the person they said should play him, which I wholeheartedly. You look at the comic book adaptation of him, you're like, well, yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
It's almost how I feel about, say, Michael Fassbender and Thrawn.
Yep.
It's kind of like, well, you got to get this guy to do it. I mean, if you're going to do it.
Right.
Now all of a sudden I can remember all these directors. Isn't that hilarious? I know the people I don't want.
Right.
That's the thing. I know the people I don't want. But, hey, listen, guys, anything that we've been talking about during this whole 3-hour plus podcast or show or whatever we've been doing, just put it in the comments below. It's kind of late. Our minds are fried.
Yeah.
This is not going to be the most elegant outro that has ever hit. But hey, just leave it in the comment section below. If you guys like this, you want to be part of our community, definitely hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. We're going to try to bring a lot more content to you guys. And this time I mean it. Well, we already said that, right? Because don't forget to watch Monday. Watch us Monday at 8 o'clock. We're going to be reviewing the
gallery.
Yeah, that is what they're calling it, right? Okay. So it's basically like the whole behind the scenes of The Mandalorian Season 2. So we're going to watch that, and we're going to review it for you guys. Eventually, we're going to bring some of the reaction videos. We've been talking about maybe doing the Family Guy parodies, maybe even doing a couple of Robot Chickens or something. There's all kinds of things that we can react to. It just depends on how much YouTube will allow us before they start giving us copyright strikes. And we don't really want to lose the channel, but you know what? For you guys, we will push that envelope. So with that, that's going to do it for us now. Like I said, join us Monday. If not, make sure you join us next Friday at 8 o'clock because we'll be here talking about more Star Wars with you guys. So I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.